Hello everyone, welcome to this week's news and community spotlights. If you were a fan of the Amazon Prime Video TV blockbuster series Fallout, you might be interested to learn more about how the studio Magnopus brought it to life with impressive virtual production tools and techniques powered by Unreal Engine. For over a decade, Magnopus has been a pioneering technology and creative studio building one-of-a-kind entertainment experiences. From immersive VR and AR experiences to all aspects of virtual production, spanning in-camera VFX, virtual art department, and LED volume operations, Magnopus, an Unreal Engine service partner, has been entrusted by today's top filmmakers and brands to push the limits of technology in service of truly memorable content. Recently, the studio worked closely with Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy's Kilter Studios on virtual production for Fallout. We caught up with AJ Shudo, director of virtual production at Magnopus, to discuss the creative and technical process for bringing this dystopian world to life using ICVFX, the real-time flexibility afforded by Unreal Engine, making virtual production work with 35mm film, and much more. If you're up for hearing the rest of the interview, you can do so at unrealengine.com/feed. For devs of all levels, beginner to advanced, there's always room to improve and grow our skills. If you're looking for a place to bump up some of your knowledge base, check out the incredible tutorials provided by Ask a Dev, a channel dedicated to streaming Unreal Engine tutorials and training of amazing quality. Some of their most recent series revolve around modular rigs and control rigs, offering a very insightful walkthrough of the tools in an easy-to-follow format that fills in gaps and gets you creating within just a few hours. Beyond just these few examples, there is a plethora of other learning content available that will undoubtedly cover a topic of interest for you and your projects. Check out their YouTube channel, Ask a Dev, for more. Now, without further ado, let's get into the community spotlights for this week. Viking Clothing by Ruslan Matvienko is a stunning 3D recreation of clothing made by the Oakstall Workshop. Masterfully utilizing tools such as Marvelous Designer, ZBrush, Substance Painter, and more to mimic the look of quilted leather and heavy protective fabrics. With a combination of 4 UV sets and a little over 41,000 tries, this study looks ready to step out of the screen. If you're interested in seeing more of their work, you can do so at their ArtStation. Hidden Elven Valley by Zehra Khan is a composition and lighting study that will take you on a visual adventure. They wanted to experiment and design the composition throughout the building process, making for a unique creative challenge that involved a lot of back and forth with gray blocking all the way up until the very end. Taking a stylized spin on a concept by the Paper Blue artist, they crafted a beautiful result utilizing a combination of blended custom sculpted meshes and Unreal Engine landscape tools, finalizing the project with just a touch of foliage. Their ArtStation shows off not only the beautiful final renders, but a very in-depth explanation of their progress and thought process. Check out their page if you're interested in learning more. Abandoned Church by Sasha Oncharova is a breathtaking revisit to their very first environment project. Showcasing marketed improvement to general composition, lighting, textures, and storytelling elements, they ended up creating a very thoughtful project absolutely bursting with life and environmental storytelling. Using tools like the Substance Suite, Maya, Houdini, and Marvelous Designer, they rendered in Unreal Engine a project that you could spend hours touring to catch every painstakingly and purposefully placed detail and still feel like there's more to find. To get the full experience or see their other work, make sure you check out their ArtStation. That's it for today's news and community spotlights. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Tina, and today with me, I have Dan.
I'm back.
Back again.
2 in a row.
Welcome. Yeah, I know. What is this? We can't do this again.
Yeah. It's
so next... you can't come back for like another 6 months.
January 2025, I will be back.
Okay, there we go. That's the plan, everybody. And if he comes back before then, we're liars.
Ooh.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So. This wasn't a signed contract, right? We can
Yeah,
We'll
that's
cut
fine.
this
That's
out.
fine. That's
This
fine.
isn't
Yeah,
live.
yeah, yeah. We'll cut it post, right? This
Yeah,
is. It's not
exactly.
like this is live. This is fine. But hi everybody. Welcome to the show. So today, as you could probably hopefully tell from the title, we're going to be talking about presenting and marketing both your portfolios as well as your projects. A little disclaimer before we dig into it too far. Of course, this is Dan and I's professional opinions, but this is not like the law of the land sort of thing, you know? So you might find some of this helpful. You might find some of it not helpful, which is fine. Hopefully, you do find some of it helpful, in which case, please feel free to enact any of this advice. But also feel free to just take bits and pieces, things that might work for your workflow. Or if you decide you hate all of it, that's okay too. This is not by any means like a follow these steps exactly to be successful guide. It is not that whatsoever. This is just tips and tricks that we have gathered over the years in the industry doing what we do that have been helpful for us and will hopefully be helpful for you.
So
Any thoughts you
you're
have on all that?
yeah,
Dan,
I
you
was
look
just
like
gonna
you have something to
say,
say.
I was just gonna say, so what you're saying is that what we're gonna talk about here is not the list that
It
will.
is not the list.
Okay,
This is
all right.
true. And if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about in regards to the list, what are you doing? What are you
Uh,
what are you doing? Check out the last stream and you'll
yeah.
enjoy. But
We also want to hear tips from you guys too. Like, we have a bunch of things that we want to cover here, but as is almost always the case in every stream, there's only so much time, and sometimes we forget things, and
this
we'd
is
love to
also true.
hear, or even more than forgetting, sometimes there's just new thoughts that even we didn't think about. Because that's going to be a big, trend for this. Is some of these things are like little things that you may not even consider when you're doing all this. So always learning new things, and we definitely want to hear from you guys if we miss anything
Yeah.
specific that you think is important. So
Absolutely. There is a question that I see from chat here. Oliver, thank you so much for asking this because we need to know why do you have two headsets, Dan? Tell us why.
yeah, I guess I didn't really do an intro. We kind of went under the assumption everyone
Yeah,
knows who I
go
am.
ahead. Tell us who you are.
I am Dan Hotnick. I am both an environment artist, and I am the behind the scenes tech guy. So this pair of headphones is monitoring the stream actually, and this pair of headphones is how I hear Tina. So I'm just making sure that all audio is good. Once we've officially are set and everything sounds good, I will probably lose one of these. But actually, it's just a style choice.
Honestly, sick. Slay. I love that for you.
I'm owning it. I'm owning it. That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
Like it's all about confidence. Like you could pull off anything if you're confident in it.
absolutely. Of course. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my background in a second too, but Dan, I want to give you a chance to go a little bit further into it. I know you mentioned you were an environment artist. You are also our tech wizard, but what are some things you've done that has given you some insight on what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So a little background for me. I started using Unreal back in
Oh
early
no.
2000s. It was a different time, different
Back in
world.
my day.
Yeah, I had to walk uphill both times to launch it. It was crazy. No, but I've been dabbling in 3D things. I mean, realistically, since probably the late 90s, early 2000s, been using Unreal for better part of 20 years or so. Spent a lot of time with environments is my main specialty. I ended up teaching at a college for 5 years before I got whisked away to the land of this. And
Mhm.
yeah, so I have a lot of experience with environments and teaching and doing portfolio critiques and things like that. So these are what, as Tina kind of mentioned, these are just a lot of the learnings that I've accrued over my long tenure with all this stuff that I just find is very tend to be very helpful for portfolios in terms of making sure that you're presenting your best foot forward and trying to give you those little things that might edge you out above somebody else that might be vying for the same position. So
Yeah. Yeah, because that is the unfortunate reality of a lot of it is there's a lot of people vying for the same things, limited resources, and hopefully some of the advice that we can give you today can kind of give you that that foot up, that step up. There are human phrases here that I'm forgetting, but they exist, and I promise, and they make sense.
Fellow
Um,
human phrases.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, English
yeah,
phrases, not human
yeah.
phrases, because we're all
Human.
humans, obviously. Why would
All,
we
all,
not
all.
just assume that?
Yeah, all two of us, both. Yes.
Both, yes, for sure. But yeah, a little bit of background on myself in case anyone is unfamiliar. So hi, I'm Tina. I am the Unreal Engine community manager. Besides doing what I do now, previous to this, I was also an environment artist for a while. When I was a lead, I was put in charge of looking through portfolios for hiring and stuff like that. So I have a lot of background on knowing what makes a portfolio stand out above others, as well as things to just kind of help with marketing and making sure that your stuff stands out and is going towards the right people. Then I was a professor for a few years as well, where hopefully part of that was also making people geared up for success for their future. And now I'm here doing this. And a big part of community management is knowing wordsmithing. I feel like that's a cool way of putting it. But knowing how to communicate your thoughts and feelings in a way that is easily understandable, which applies very much to general marketing, presenting your work, all that good stuff. So I have a bit of a background of both social and technical, and I think combined,
With
I
our
don't know,
powers
they do
combined.
things when they're combined.
See, this is the wordsmithing that she was talking about.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I am so good at it, obviously.
Well,
But
listen,
yeah,
this wordsmithing, it's not something that happens immediately. You have to keep retooling it and and get it there, right? It's not just the first
yeah,
hammer doesn't make the sword, right? Like, come on.
yeah. Thanks, Dan. That's
You're welcome.
definitely what I was intending when I said that, for sure. But yeah, if you have questions throughout the stream while we go out and talk about these things, feel free to ask. We're gonna be looking at chat, judging you this whole
Yeah.
time. So if you have anything that you want to ask or just add to the conversation, feel free to toss it in there. We'll make sure we keep an eye out. But Dan, since you are the guest, that is the title you have now among your two headphones.
Yes. I heard it twice.
Would you like to would you like to kick us off? Start us off today.
Yeah, sure. So I do have something that I'll demo. I guess I can nix this for now, just for my own sanity. As Turning Cog says, yes, all right, human. Um, yeah, so I do have something that I'll show off here in a little bit, but I guess I really wanted to kind of start off with just kind of breaking down a bit more of what we're kind of referring to when we're talking about presenting your projects and portfolios. And this is important because while some of the things that I'll be talking specifically will be aiming a little bit more towards like an ArtStation post or your own personal portfolio, a lot of these will also translate to marketing on YouTube or other social media platforms, or creating assets to be put on the marketplace if you're going to be selling something there.
Yeah.
Really, all a portfolio is personal marketing. Like that's really the gist of it. So a lot of these things are going to transfer back and forth in between them. And I think where I'll start is that doing great work is a huge piece of the puzzle. Like that is your main piece, right? Is you want to refine your skills, hone your craft, and create great work. But creating the work on its own is not the end all be all. It's not the final part. You also have to be able to show this work off in interesting and compelling ways, in a way that makes people want to first. I mean, if you're just going purely on putting it on ArtStation, click on your thumbnail in the sea of thumbnails. But also, if you are applying for a position or a role, making it so that not only the person viewing your work is engaged, but also can really see that you've honed your skills, see your craft in there. And in some ways, just knowing that you've went above and beyond in your presentation can show to a potential employer that you don't do just the bare minimum. It's not, I made the piece, here's a picture, It's called Art God. Like showing, yeah,
Art.
yeah. I don't know. That's actually kind of metal. But showing that like you're confident in showing it off and that you really want to put your best foot forward and you want your creations to be viewed in their best possible light is it's a big deal. Like it's a small part of it all in the grand scheme of things, but it is a big part because in many cases it quite literally can be the difference of like, hey, we like both these persons' style, but this one is just presented so well that it stands out even just a little bit. Sometimes that's all it takes to be like, all right, we're going to go with person A over person B. Um, so you want to be really mindful of things with that. One of the things that'll probably come up as we go forward is, you know, we are on the community side of everything here. So a lot of the spotlights that we do, you know, we have eyes
Mhm.
on and have input on whether or not those are chosen and things like that. I do the news for you know, Unreal here. So very often we'll be getting like, hey, we have a sale on the marketplace, or here's the free assets. And then what I'll have to do is I'll go through like, okay, here's the free assets. I go through and see what kind of marketing material there are. And then I'm trying to present it in the news in the best possible way. And some people are really good at presenting their art and their marketplace assets. Some don't give it enough love, and it really shows, and it doesn't make their art look as appealing, right? Like you might not be as excited, you know, looking at like, all right, this thing's for free, and then you look at the pictures and they're kind of low res and blurry and they're not framed very well, and they only have one video and it's just kind of the player pawn running around with their mouse, you know, movement set to 10 million, and it's really hard to look at. You might not be nearly as excited to jump into that, you know, piece, especially if there's a dollar, you know, sign attached to that as something that's like really well composed and beautifully framed and looks great and has beautiful movement in the video and things like that. These little things can quite literally be the difference between somebody buying something and not, somebody using something and not. And I end up seeing it so much more now because I am, you know, quite frankly, looking through all these assets, trying to find, you know, good images or video clips to use with the news. So these things are not only going to be very beneficial just in general, just as good practices to have, but also might make it stand out a little bit more to some folks like Tina and I if we wanted to, you know, spotlight somebody. So that's another thing to consider. It's not only just marketing, but it's also, you know, people will show off your work if you show off your work. Right? Like I guess
Mhm.
that's like the best way to put it is if you have really good high quality work that you're showing off well, then other people will want to show it off well too because it's amazing. I just saw I'm this was pulled right out of this random thought in my head, so I can't remember the artist's name, but they just recently did a 3D rendering of Jack Black that was just phenomenal. Like it was stunning. And I even sent it to people that aren't even into art. I'm just like, look at this. Like I just need to nerd out for a second. And not only was the work itself stunning, but they showed it off so well with great breakdowns, great video clips, ultra high resolution images that were composed beautifully, you know, on and on and on. I'm kind of rambling at this point. So is there any good things to comments or anything to jump on, Tina, before I continue any further?
Well, I was actually, I had a question for you,
Go ahead.
just from myself. Sorry.
From a fellow human.
From a fellow human. Yes, I have a inquiry for another human of that is like myself. Um, but if you had just kind of a quick itemized list of things that you prefer seeing in a portfolio set or things like that, things that are, man, I really should not have called myself a wordsmith. Do you have an itemized list of things that you look for as kind of like the bare minimum requirement for setting up a portfolio piece or things like that?
I definitely do. I'm going to double back real quick and shout out second favorite, Sefki Ibrahim is the artist. You should definitely look at that piece. It's fantastic. It's beautifully well done. I'm gonna try to parrot back the question here. Let me know if I missed anything. Just kind of like general list of things to look for when setting up a portfolio.
Yeah, like you're scrolling through, what are the things that you would expect to see in what you consider a good, well set up portfolio piece?
Okay, this is great. First and foremost, and this probably makes a lot of sense. Thumbnail should be immaculate. Like, take the time with the thumbnail. It's maybe not the most fun thing. I know personally, I'll say it's not my favorite part of the process at all. But when you're, again, scrolling through a list of thumbnails, that needs to stand out. There's a lot of really darn good artists out there. And that's not only something that you have to compete with, but it's also very, like, I find it personally very fascinating how sometimes you'll see a thumbnail and you'll click on it and you'll be like, oh, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be, or maybe the quality is a little different than you expected. But the thumbnail was so captivating that you clicked. You're like, I gotta see this. And then other times you'll have people that have wonderful art and they just did not get a thumbnail that looked all that enticing, and you glossed right over it because, again, there was something else that caught your eye. So really pay attention to the thumbnail. At least for getting, like, if you want to just be generally noticed on like on the front page or whatever of ArtStation. If you are sending out your portfolio, the thumbnail is a little less important, but I think that a lot of the practices that you can get with really nailing in that thumbnail will translate to also the general compositions for everything else in there. I would say the first image should obviously be your best one. Again, some of these things are going to seem pretty obvious, but make sure that the first thing you see is your best foot forward. Sometimes that'll be an image. In other cases, a video is the way to go with that. I personally say, barring some very niche examples, you should do both images and videos for pretty much anything you're doing. The reason for that is images are really great if you're data limited, or you just wanted to share something really quickly, or you only have a second to glance at something. But while a picture will paint 1,000 words, a movie is more words. Smithing. You can show
We're
off
killing
more.
this. We're killing it, Dan.
You can show off more in a video. Especially with natural terrain and things like that. Like, still grass is great, but swaying grass is beautiful. Like, little things like that. So I would say for me, what I'm looking for is both, because I personally gravitate to the motion picture, if you will. But having the still shot is really great for, again, if I'm bandwidth limited, or sometimes I just want to save the image and put it as a desktop background, and or add it to a list. Like, because this is actually something that I did a while back, is when I was going through and looking at portfolios and things like that, we would make, like, keep these people in mind for the future sort of thing. And having an image like that with your image, if you can, make sure you have some sort of watermark on it, because some people will just save an image and then the image, because whatever you name the image is what it downloads as. So if you name it 01.jpg and somebody downloads that and then they look at it and they're like, oh yeah, who was this artist? And there's nothing on the image and it's called .1.jpg, there's no way of noticing that. But make sure that when you're doing that, make it
actually super
small.
quick want to throw just right in with that. Please do actually name your photos.
Yes.
For that exact reason. So having a watermark, but also having it named something besides just JPEG 1 or whatever. Have it named with either your initials or your full artist name, whichever you prefer. For myself, I'll put my name, abbreviation of the project name, and the date that it was posted, so that all of that context is available when looking just at the title or thumbnail of this thing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's a great point. And you can even, in some instances, I would say, if you wanted to forego the watermark, if you have it in the name, the only thing with that, and this really isn't a huge solve because there's ways around things like that, it does make it harder for somebody to, like, take your work and pass it off as their own if there's some sort of your branding on there. But I would also argue that you want the watermark to be kind of small and out of the way. And if it's small and out of the way, it's easy to crop. So there's no easy way, to solve that completely. But make sure that there is at least something identifiable for it in case somebody wants to reach out. But definitely be careful with the watermark, because some people will do like the whole image watermark, and that's cool. But going back to what we were saying at the beginning, is we are presenting the work, so we want to present it at its best foot forward. Its best foot forward's probably not with a watermark over the whole thing. So, like Tina said, have your name, put it small, one of the side, one of the corners on the sides, out of the way, but there can be really helpful. But yeah, video and pictures if you can. If you're doing a character or an animation or something like that, a Sketchfab link is awesome. The more you can expose in that, or Marmoset, yeah, it was good. Yeah, any of those tools would be great. The more that you can expose, the better. This is probably more of a personal preference thing, but I know a lot of people who also agree with this. Is, again, because we are showing off your work. Show off your work. Like, the final product is only part of it. Like, people, when they're hiring, they want to know that they're hiring somebody who can do the job, right? So if you killed your spec map, show that off. If you killed your roughness map, great. If your UVs are packed to like the 99% and it looks awesome, show that off. Like, show that you know what you're doing. The end result is really cool, but it's only part of the story. They're hiring somebody that, yes, will get them the end result, but in games specifically, optimization is huge. So show that you know how to do that well. Show that, like, if you're using a displacement map, that it's not 4K, because that's ridiculous. You don't need that much detail for a height map, that sort of thing.
8K?
Like,
8K instead?
Yeah. Well, I love that too, because Megascan stuff will generally do that. You'll download a thing and it's just like, this height map is 8K, and it's like, this height map needs to be maybe 1024. Like, like on the high end, like, it does not need to be that detailed. Now, there's exceptions to every rule. If you have super fine detail in there that kind of gets washed out at like 2K or 1K or lower, then obviously. But these are the things we're talking about. Like, show that you know what you're doing. Show that you know how to optimize a height map, so that way you're getting the most fidelity out of it without packing megabytes and megabytes of data in a single texture that's not really necessary. Show that you know how to pack a texture. And if you don't know how to pack a texture, I would recommend learning how to pack a texture, because it is huge and very important and saves a lot of data and is really cool, and you'll look super fly if you know how to do that. So those sorts of things can be the difference between hiring somebody and skipping over somebody. Because again, if I'm shown two people that have an end product that are very good, but one person knows how to optimize, they know how to utilize their resources really great, they know how to show off the work, another person just kind of did auto UV and left all the textures at 4K and just did that, I'm going to go with the guy that knows how to optimize, because that's less that I have to teach this person, and that's just easier as a person in a business. So if you've done the work, show off the work, show off a breakdown, show off a couple breakdowns, like, show your work off. Like, really, that is the key. It's a very might be kind of surprising, and I would actually say for if you haven't experienced this before, go onto ArtStation and just click through every single one on a page for a second, and you'd be surprised how dramatically different the quality of the presentation itself, not the work, but the way they present the work is. This happens a lot because, again, Tina and I I'm doing the news, picking out community spotlights and things like that. And a lot of times we'll see a thumbnail, be like, wow, that's really cool. We open it, it's one picture. And again, like, I made this joke before, and it just says, hillside. I made a hillside in Unreal. Well, I can't really show that off in video format because it's one picture and you made a hillside in Unreal. Did you make all the assets? Is it Quixel assets? Did you get this off the marketplace? There was one that I saw. This was a little bit while further back, but somebody had taken one of the Quixel examples and moved a couple plants and added a light. And they're like, look at this environment I made. And that's what they said. They made this environment. It's like, well, first off, no, you didn't. Number one, I know it because I've seen the environment. But two, it okay, what did you make? There's so much, especially now that we have so many things like marketplace items and Quixel mega scans and all these different things. There was a time way back when where you pretty much had to make basically everything. Like there was some asset libraries, but you were from the ground up it. Now we have all these wonderful tools that make production so much easier and let you really, produce high quality work without having to do every single nitty gritty detail. But make sure that you are being very clear with what you specifically made, what was an asset pack, what was a marketplace item, what was a Quixel Mega Scan or whatever. This was supposed to be my quick list, and I've gone very far into a tangent, so I do apologize.
No, it's good information. If anything, there's a couple things I'd like to expand on that you mentioned.
Please stop
too. Stop, Dan. Stop. No, but there's a couple good points that I wanted to, especially with you mentioning, we select the spotlights for each week, and there's a couple things we kind of require when we go through, and these are general good things for just marketing as well. At least a 30-second video. I know Dan is going to disagree with me and say longer.
Yeah, I'll
at least 30 seconds.
I'll very quickly interject. I would say, in general, at least 30 seconds is really good. Again, you can go more. People can skip through a video, if they feel like it's a little long, like you can skip through it. They can't extend it, right? So if you have stuff to show off, it's cool to show off. Specifically for the news and community spotlights, the sweet spot for me is like 90 seconds to 120, because that gives me plenty enough footage to cut around and make sure that it flows really well with the video. But yeah, I would say bare minimum is 30 seconds.
Yeah. Just some kind of video that actually goes through and makes your work feel alive. Of course, it is easy to make work look and feel alive through just photographs as well, but videos, you're able to show off what it looks like walking through your environment, or you're able to show what it looks like if you were to walk around in a museum with the prop that you made in a case or something like that. And it adds a certain level of information and detail work that it's just not possible quite to glean from a single photo. So this is why videos are very important for us. And then the other thing we haven't really talked about very much yet is copy, or otherwise the written part of your work. I know we've also been talking a lot about portfolios, but this particular piece of advice leans in portfolios, but I'd argue heavier into marketing for something like a game page or things like that. Making sure that you have very thorough copy or information of what it is that you're showing in a text format is just as important as having beautiful content to show. If we stick with the picking spotlights theme for a second here, so we select the spotlight as long as it has enough footage and beautiful content for Dan to be able to work with to make that work. We can go from there. But then next step is writing the script, writing the bit of information that goes around this. And this applies not just to spotlights, but if you want to apply to have your work showcased in either like a dev interview or some kind of website or things like that, having that information readily available makes it a lot easier to pick up your work for things like that. So if you literally type out your thought process behind this is the level that I made, this is what it was inspired by, this is why I designed certain aspects to look and feel like this, these are the programs that I used, these are the things that I found difficult in the process of making, but this is how I worked through it. Having an actual walkthrough text guide of what it is that your thought process was is huge. And it's also a good habit to get into anyway for things like art tests or interviews, because you're going to have to be able to explain these sorts of things in those scenarios anyway. And likewise, for game pages or things like that, you're going to need to know how to explain and market your product, right? So getting yourself in the the familiar role of literally describing what it is that you made, how it's cool, why it's exciting, things that people can expect from it are only going to elevate your particular page further. And the more information people can garner from your thought process and what it is that they're looking at or getting into or buying again for a project, the better. But that's my little quick fire addition there.
Yeah, no, and they're really good points. Like there's so many things to consider, and those are specifically parts that again kind of tend to get maybe glanced over when it comes to putting together, your piece and things like that. Again, if you put in a lot of work and you write a long description, that's not a bad thing because people can choose not to read it if they don't care. And the people who do care and want to learn more about your process, learn more about the project, then they have that information there for them, which is huge. And that's really great. Specifically, to tie back a little bit, if I was a hiring manager and I was trying to find somebody who's good for the team. This isn't true of every company. Sometimes, they hire people who aren't, maybe super experienced with, creating the art and stuff like that, but they're, trained to know what to look for and things like that. Even whether they're trained to know for what to look for, or you just know it inherently because you have the experience, you want to show those sorts of things off. The interviews that you will hopefully get with your wonderful work that you are showing off beautifully, is a way for them to kind of test and make sure that you work and that you'll work well with the company and then you fit the culture and blah 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 blah. And that's really the main point of that interview, right? Is to get that there. But you can also kind of like shoe in a little bit of that stuff, in a little bit of stuff in the art itself. Like one of the things they're going to try to figure out is like, how do you work? What is your pipeline? What are your timelines? How long, all those sorts of things. If you can seed some of that information in your portfolio pieces that you're showing, you're kind of already getting a leg up now over somebody else, because again, they're going to move on to the next paid, next step, which is going to be the interview. And they'll still probably ask you a lot of those things, but that will, could be that little bit of a step up. Because they're already like, oh, I can kind of already tell based off of how they're presenting the work and what they're showing off here that their pipeline is probably similar to this. That's great. That's what we do, so on and so forth. I can actually kind of show off real quickly here. You would have seen this demoed in the news before the stream, but if you jumped in late, we'll go with show it off here and you can view the news later. But we have one of the spotlights for this week was a art piece called Hidden Elven Valley by Zara Khan. Huh?
Hidden Elven I'm just,
yeah,
the dramatics. That's all. That's what I'm here for.
And this one is a great example to me of some of the things that I would look for. They have fairly simple repeating. This is only about 9-second video clip. Simple camera move. It's a slow push in, slight, pitch with the camera. It's pretty simple, but that movement is already interesting because now you're being drawn in quite literally into the focal point of it. They went through and they did little details such as the swirly little wind pieces that go through, a little bit of the leaves and stuff like that. Like they took something that is very peaceful, very calm, very serene, and they are quite literally drawing you in with their little details and camera moves and things like that. Again, you don't have to go crazy. When we say, hey, you should have a video element, it doesn't mean that you need to cut it like a Michael Bay, trailer. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, crazy dramatic. Just something that is interesting movement, compelling movement, and shows off the work really well. The other thing that I really liked about it is they had, it's not terribly long, but a little bit of a breakdown here. They credited artwork from other people, which is huge. Make sure you do that. If you are using asset packs, if you're using Quixel things, if you are using marketplace items, if you are using a concept art from somebody else, just please credit them, please. It is incredibly rude not to do that, to just, I don't want to say take their work, but I mean basically take their work and then pass it off as your own. Make sure you credit that you've used somebody else's work, cite out or link out to them, make sure that you can have that. So they had this nice cool zoom in. They have a great image beauty shot. They had a secondary angle. Again, very simple push in, a little bit of particles, nothing too crazy, but very compelling. And then actually a breakdown of their assets. So now, as somebody who's potentially hiring, in this hypothetical situation, okay, these are cool. They're fairly modular. They're, I can see some technique here in how they are creating their assets. They have made a quite large and stunning piece with what, like 24 pieces at most. That's great. That's a great thing that I would look for as for somebody, if I wanted them to be an artist on my project. Just some more additional breakdowns. This I love. It's showing their thought process. So you get this basic idea of, here's what I was kind of going for initially. I did this really rough block out. We can see some focal points here. If you notice, and they break this down, the focal point shifted. They changed it. And it's cool to say, like, okay, here was the main idea. Here's how I worked through it. I'm noticing that this is drawing attention from something else that I actually think I want to show off more. Explaining that, showing how they've repositioned it, removed this big tree in the background. Here. Did draw over, like this is showing off their skills as an artist. This at the top is very, very compelling, very interesting. I find this great. This on its own would make it to a list of for me, if I was like, oh, I'm making a project of this similar style, I want to go this way, this would, end up on my short list. But if it was just this versus somebody else who had all this, to me, that is more compelling. Assuming that the art is on equal level, this is more compelling, as somebody looking for somebody to become part of the team, than just an image or just a video with a very, very little description. So these sorts of things are that kind of, again, above and beyond that I'm talking about, that can really draw your eyes and make people want to show you off or hire you. Again, we wanted to show this off. We went through a few different people when we were trying to pick the community spotlight, and we decided that this was the one. And we decided it because the work itself was great, it was presented great, and that was really it. It was those two things hand in hand. It wasn't one only, it was both together. Mm-hmm. So, and even down to like showing off materials. I love that. That's just my nerdy side talking. I don't know that any like random hiring manager would notice that sort of thing, but I love that. I think that's really cool. So
no, it is. It's good gifts to be able to see that kind of thought process. And even cute little personal touch.
Real life reference, which is sweet. So yeah.
All fantastic points. And I know we're talking a lot right now. A lot of this is going to be us talking a lot, but we do also have some demos to walk through with some advice on how to set up good camera angles, how to get those perfect shots of your portfolio pieces or your projects that could be used for other marketing tools such as trailers or demos or things like that. So we'll get into that.
Yeah,
we will. That's up next. But if you're fine with it, Dan, we got a couple questions that came in that I'd like to tackle first.
Sure.
And then we can hop on into it. We'll go into the next part here. So first question here is, how do you guys feel about fictional case studies and creating a product or project for a fictional company? Would a potential employer love to see something like this? So, of course, I do want to throw out the disclaimer again of like, this is Dan and I's professional opinions on these things. So do not take what we say here today as word of law. However, I think there's not necessarily a downside to doing something like that. I think that would depend more so on what your end goal is, what kind of role you're aiming for. Being able to show off a fictional product for a fictional company could be useful if that's something that you're hoping to do, like create renders for companies of products. Then yes, sure. But if you're wanting to focus on prop art or environment art or things like that, then you'd probably want to approach your creation process a little differently. So it very much depends on what you're going for. The there's not a downside, is the short answer. I don't see a reason that it wouldn't be impressive for something like that, but I also don't think it's necessary to go that far to make an impressive piece for whatever it is that you're trying to show off, whether that be a portfolio or otherwise.
Yeah.
All right, next question. For marketplace assets, can we talk later about all of the overuse of post-process that makes it hard to see what you are getting with the assets? This definitely applies more so towards marketing than portfolio pieces, because those obviously want to zhuzh up, you're in control of what you show of your portfolio, right? But if you are marketing something like an actual product on marketplace, for example, yes, it is very important that you have truthful advertising and that you're showing off what it is that the consumer is actually getting. So try to avoid overall post-process effects or things like that. If you want to show off your props or your asset packs or your environments, whatever it is that you're trying to advertise, in different scenarios, you can do that by simulating different kinds of light scenarios that these props would be in. Day-night cycle is easy for an overall environment or things like that. There's definitely ways to enhance and show off what it is that you're trying to market, but still be honest with the consumer about what it is that they're going to be getting. So that's definitely something to keep in mind while you're going through and creating this content, is this end result still indicative of what the actual product is? So that's a very important question to keep in mind.
That's especially true if you're selling something. Like if you're like, oh, I made this asset, but I recolored it in Photoshopped afterwards, and then that's the image you see on, the sale, and then they buy it and it doesn't look anything like, the asset they bought. That could get you in some big trouble, obviously. But I would also argue that that's fairly true for even like portfolio pieces and stuff like that. You can do stuff in post, but again, make sure that you are being very upfront that you have done stuff in post, because anything that seems misleading, even if it's unintentional, is going to feel sketchy, even if you had a good intention with it. Transparency is huge in all of these things.
Yes, definitely. Okay, there were a couple. I'm not going to go through all the questions right now. Some of them I will hold for later, but there's a couple more I wanted to get through before we moved on.
Sure thing.
If I could find them. They exist, and they're here in a list. I just got to find them again real
on a
quick.
list.
On not the list, but a list.
Just
yes.
A list. Just a regular, everyday, bog standard list.
Yes. Here it is. Should environment artists focus on making every asset themselves, or is it okay if we use and credit other assets to speed up the process of making a portfolio piece? And I'd love your thoughts on this as well, Dan. But this is also advice that I want to push further. This is not just a portfolio piece question. This can be applied to actual games or products that you make and even sell. I don't think at this point in time anyone actually expects anyone to make everything 100% from the ground up, especially if it's a large scale thing like a full environment, a full game. There's a reason that things like asset packs exist. There's a reason that things like the Unreal Marketplace, ArtStation Marketplace, Sketchfab Marketplace, Fab now, there's a reason that all of these places exist. And it's not bad for you to utilize these kinds of things in your project for personal reasons or otherwise. What is important, harkening back to what I was just talking about before with truthful advertising, is that you credit where these things that you didn't make came from. And then, of course, there's some business sides of some of these as well, as follow-up licensing, depending on if it is like a game you're selling. There might be agreements you need to make on the side based off of amount of sales you make, things like that. That's a different conversation that we could potentially have in the future. But the point is, there is nothing wrong with using other assets or textures or megascans or whatnot that you didn't necessarily make yourself. The only thing that is important here is disclosing that information. There's whole entire jobs that are based around the concept of you being able to take assets or props that someone else made and then making a full environment out of those or designing a level with them in a cohesive and intuitive way. So this is still a skill set that is sought out and is important to have. So there's no reason to not do it. Just be honest about it while you're doing this. Make sure that you don't say, I made everything here, blah, 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 blah. But the follow-up part of this question, of course, was should you make every asset? Not necessarily. I think it depends on how much time you have per project, what it is that you're trying to make, what your overall timeline is. There's, in my personal opinion, I don't think there's a reason to make another traffic cone if there are 13 million other traffic cones that exist. And I don't think showing that you can make the same traffic cone necessarily shows that you are better and or worse than other artists. But if you have the time to do it, there's no reason to not at the same time, because then you can put in the description, I made everything that you see, which of course can have a big impact in and of itself, but it's not. I'm not going to think that you are incapable as an artist or as a game maker or as a dev if you just pull in a traffic cone that's already existed, has already been tested, is already optimized, is already ready to be used. So that's my long-winded
I'd be incredibly compelled by somebody who makes an environment where everything in it was made by them except for the traffic cone. I would have questions.
The traffic
yeah,
cone.
I'd be like, there's a story here. I need to know why this person either refused or was so adored by the traffic cone that it just needed it. He was like, no, I need this one in it.
I think I'd also like an opposite, where they made this huge, crazy, impressive level all from other asset packs and kit bashing, and then there's one photo that is just zooming in on a giant cone. It's like, I made this cone. Don't even recognize all the hard work you put into building the level around it or anything like that.
There's 4 traffic cones and 3 of them were purchased, and then the 4th one you're like, but that one was mine.
Can you figure out which one it is?
yeah. Honestly, I would echo pretty much everything you just said. I maybe would expand on it a little bit and say it really just kind of depends on what you're trying to show off. Like if your goal with an environment is to say, hey, I am a proficient modeler of both organic and inorganic assets. I'm really proficient at texturing and assembly and lighting, and I really just kind of want to go gung-ho on a piece and just show everything that I'm proficient in, then cool. Yeah, by all means, make it all yourself. That's great. I personally, I'm kind of a little begrudgingly, like, I want to make my own stuff. But even I use asset packs when I feel like it makes sense. But if, again, the goal is to show off, like, here's all my skills, this is what I want to show off to you, great. If you're like, you know what, I just had a really cool environment idea in my head, and I had 2 weeks of free time, and there was no way in heck I was going to get it all done if I made it myself. So yeah, I used some Quixel trees, I've grabbed a couple free marketplace assets or whatever, and I made a really darn cool environment. That's also fine, because that was obviously the intended goal. Now, if you're like, hey, I want to show off that I'm really great at modeling, and nothing here I modeled, well, then you have not really attained, what you're trying to show off there. So that's totally fine. But again, as Tina said, and I'm going to echo it because it's so important, make sure you're clear and credit what you did, because I've seen this happen. It's becoming less and less now that there are such robust, Quixel packs and other asset packs for foliage. But foliage has always been a nightmare in games and will probably continue to be a nightmare for a while. There's a reason why people are getting paid a lot of money to make these packs, because nobody wants to do it. But if you wanted to show off that you were, good at doing foliage, then don't use those packs if you can. Or because this is the reason I brought this up, is this actually happened to a buddy of mine, probably 10 years ago now at this point. where he made a great environment, and he used foliage packs, and they were beautiful. But God love him, he said, yeah, this is an environment I made. This is really cool, whatever. And somebody reached out and did an interview with him, and they're like, dude, okay, this is perfect. We need somebody to make foliage. Can you please walk us through how you made all this foliage? He's in the interview at this point, and he has to explain, oh, I didn't do any of the foliage. And it was really awkward, and he clearly didn't get the job. So make sure you're being clear with what it is that you have, because you don't want to sell yourself on something you can't do or don't want to do. So make sure you're saying like, hey, this asset was from this asset was from that, this asset was from there, and here's what I did. And if you can, I would even say go through and do a breakdown image, or as we saw in the other one, here's a list of all the assets I made just in a zoo. These are all the things that I specifically did. Things like that can be huge.
Man, I don't think I've ever had a story make me want to just curl up
It was really
and crawl into
really
a hole more than that.
Yeah.
Felt it. I felt it in my bones.
And that's why I brought it up, because I still think about it sometimes. I wasn't even me, and I like cringe by proxy. Like,
yeah. All right, last question I want to handle super quickly before we get over into the demos is how would you promote your portfolio differently on different platforms? You know, like Instagram, ArtStation, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. So the thing to look into for all of this, and this again applies across, I would almost argue that this again almost leans more into marketing necessarily than a portfolio setup. But I think you made a great point, Dan, of what is a portfolio if not just marketing yourself and your own work. So each of these platforms do have different algorithms, different things that work best for them. This information is public and out there, and I recommend that you go research, find exactly what those things are, what works best for you. I could spend a long time just had my 1,000-yard stare. I could spend a long time talking about algorithms and how they work and the ins and out of them. But the thing that is important to keep in mind is very rarely do you want to market the exact same piece of content on every single platform. So something that you have on Instagram, for example, you want to have a home base. So if you have your game hosted on the Epic Game Store, for example, have that as your home base. That is where all of the information about your game or whatever it is lives. If it's your portfolio, maybe it's your ArtStation page or your personal website, wherever it is, your home base. This is where everything that anyone could possibly ever need to know about this thing that you're trying to market lives. Then take out bits and pieces from that and separate them out according to whatever platform it is that you're going to be putting it on. So if you're looking for a difference for Instagram, for example, even on platforms, an Instagram post versus an Instagram reel, those are two separate pieces of content in and of themselves on the same platform that serve different purposes. So you'll have maybe a particular trailer or a particular cinematic that you really like, right? Take a small clip from the beginning of it, perhaps, that you could put on your Instagram reel. Take a separate small clip of that same trailer that you can put on your TikTok or your YouTube shorts or some other kind of equivalent. But the main piece of advice here is have differing pieces of content for all of these platforms, because then if people go out of their way to look up your project or look you up on these other platforms, they're getting more information about what it is that you are trying to market or trying to sell or whatever it may be. And it gets them even further interested in finally being drawn back to home base, where they can put all of the pieces of the puzzle together and see what the whole thing is. So that's my main advice for that. I am finger gunning a lot in today's show, I've realized. So it's a treasure hunt of engagement. Exactly right. The other thing that goes hand in hand with this, like I said, make sure you look up how these different algorithms work on these different platforms, because they are all different, which is great and infuriating all at the same time. But this is usually public information that you can get with just a quick search. So take the time to figure out how these different platforms work, what performs best on each, and then make your own content accordingly per platform. And then go crazy. Send it everywhere. Get as many eyes on it as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you have anything you wanted to add, Dan?
I just a slight thing to add on to is don't be afraid to use the various tools on each platform too. Like Tina said, have a post and a reel are different. Specifically YouTube, this isn't the most common platform for like having like a portfolioed audience sort of thing. But if you make a cool, piece, release the video, and then don't forget to use a community post that just says, hey, by the way, I released this video and this is what it's about. And here's some really cool things. Come check it out. Like those sorts of things that can kind of tie back in, even within the same platform, can be helpful too.
Yes, definitely. All right. Well, we have more questions. We will get back to them. I promise you. We are not leaving you in the dust, but we do want to make sure that we get through some of the demo content that we brought for you today. And then we'll circle back around to them. We'll still take some questions as we go through, especially if it applies to what we're doing exactly in that moment of time. As long as I can nab it, I'll keep an eye out for you, Dan, because I know you're going to be busy doing the things. But I will toss questions at you as they come. But if you're ready to get into it, I am.
I am. And actually, if you have a question that's like quick, it might be a good time to do it. I'm going to do a quick behind the scenes thing. That's the computer that has my demo on it. So I'm going to have to just finagle myself and switch over there. So I am just going to give myself a really cool freeze frame here. And then I'm going to go and switch my camera around real quick. So Tina, please, maybe vamp for a second.
10. Okay, vamp. I could do that. Yeah, let's see. What's another question here that I can tackle real quick? What's a good way to present your work if you don't have any industry experience? Entry level is tough. Entry level is super tough. And that's part of why we wanted to do this show today, actually. Well, this information is of course applicable to people of all levels of experience, entry level, intermediate, master, whatever you describe yourself as. These tips apply across the board. So if you don't have any industry experience, maybe you're looking for that first step out, I would argue that the more you have available on your portfolio pieces, the better. So kind of like what Dan was saying earlier about having the videos, having the breakdowns, having stills, all of those still apply, but I would say take the time to actually go that extra step further. Show off your wireframes. Show off what your native topology looks like. Yes, we have the magic of Nanite, which can do a lot, but clean topology, especially if you're doing something like character work, showing that you have morphing topology, actually take the time to show that. Show those wireframes, show your UVs, like Dan said, make sure that they're packed and they're very nice. You're not wasting any of that UV space. Just show everything in as much detail as you possibly can, because if you don't have on your resume the ability to say, I've been working at X position at X studio for 12 years or something like that, there's a certain level of expectation that comes with that, right? If you can't lean back on that, the only thing you have to lean on is what you show in your portfolio. So the more you show in the greater detail, the better for you.
100%. The one thing I will add to there, and this can be kind of daunting and intimidating, and I totally get it, but if you don't have any experience at all, which everybody starts that way, game jams are something you can put on to the resume. Even if it's like a 24-hour thing, like that's not huge, but what people, when they're looking for experience, what they're trying to say is, like, you know how to do the job with people. Like your demo reel shows that you can do it alone, and that's cool. Doing something alone is a completely different thing than working with other people and knowing how to communicate and hand off assets and be timely and meet deadlines and all those other things, which is the whole other side of the professional thing. So even if it's like, the art in the game wasn't crazy because you had 24 hours to do it, or 48 hours, or a week, or whatever it is. Just having that experience is something, and you don't need to like get hired for that. You can just participate in those sorts of things. Those are little cheat codes that can also help you alongside a beautifully formatted portfolio.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So if you're part of the current running Project Titan, for example, that is a great example doing stuff like that. Later this year, we're also going to have the Epic Mega Jam. So keep an eye out for that. If that's something you're interested in, it's going to be a lot of fun. But welcome back, Dan. We're on the other side of the room.
Yes, it has been a huge transition. You can see it looks very different. The weather is wild here. Trying to get acclimated, but
I like that you've gone full weatherman with this now. Yes, you can
see
a cold
front coming in from the north. As you can see. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and jump into a quick little demo. So there's a million things. I didn't even finish my list for ArtStation stuff. There's a million things we could talk about here. So there's plenty of things that we could show off. I do have a quick thing that I do want to show off, though, because I feel like it's kind of pertinent to what Tina and I were talking about with, showing off your assets if you're going to be showing off, on the marketplace or something like that. This also obviously applies to a portfolio, but these sorts of things are kind of important to consider, because very often I see, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me, I gotta reach over here. Hold on a second.
Reach off the screen.
I had to press a button.
Oh, you're seeing the real magic work here.
Yeah. So this is one of the free assets for the remainder of this month. We're almost at the end here, so if you haven't picked it up, get it, because it's cool. It's really nice.
Yes.
So we're gonna kind of show that off a bit. And what I'll oftentimes see, and this is not a specific example of any specific, thing that I'm showing off here, but things I have seen in the past is people be like, all right, I made this cool thing, and then I kind of took a picture, and maybe that's the picture. That's kind of cool. It could be, posed better and it's really blurry, whatever. And they're like, oh, but click here for the video showing it off. And this is what we get in the video. And it's just like this really sporadic camera, and you can't really see what's going on, and the mouse sensitivity is clearly way too high, and they're having a hard time controlling it, and we're just mostly getting a view of Quinn, and it's not that visually appealing. I'm gonna say something. Learn to love Sequencer. And I get to say this as someone who is currently mid-progress of learning to love Sequencer. I started with Matinee way back in the day, before Unreal 4 was a thing. It was a different time. It was a Matinee. And Matinee scarred me. Listen, it's great. It was a great tool. I was young. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was pounding my head against the wall, and it wasn't working very well. And because of that, I was kind of afraid of Sequencer, because I'm just like, oh, but it's how much better can it be? It's way better. It's so much better than it. Yeah, it is a huge improvement over the older tools. But I was, like many, very reluctant to use it for a very long time, because I was like, well, I don't really have so much time in my day, and I'm not really worried about it, and I can just, I just want to make it simple and go. Learn to love Sequencer. If you refuse to learn to love Sequencer, that is fine. I have another cheat code for you. You will very rarely see any demo back when E3 was a thing with people using a mouse, because while a mouse is incredibly precise, it's also not very smooth. It's kind of jerky. If you have, and it doesn't have to be Xbox, but any sort of controller input, you can get very, very smooth camera movement just with a couple thumbsticks. You don't have to go crazy. You can literally load up OBS, make this full screen, move your cursor out of the thing, press G to go into game mode so you don't have icons in here, and just beautiful view of my Tokyo that I made. I did not make this, but it is a very simple
Proper
way.
credit, Dan. Come
Yeah. Of just being able to show off your work. And it's very smooth. Again, this is not the most ideal way. Use sequencer. But if you refuse to use sequencer, this is another way to do it. And I'll even be honest, there's a couple times, actually, this is a little behind the scenes. This is how I captured the footage for the news and community spotlight as with a controller. Because I was on a time crunch. I didn't have time to do a bunch of cameras. It took me 5 minutes to load this up, turn on my controller, and fly through a scene. Very simple. Sequencer will give you much more control. One of the things that is a downside with using a controller is first off, unless you adjust the settings, you have to like barely touch your thumbstick to do a turn. And if you slightly change it, it becomes noticeable. So it's not like foolproof. Again, use sequencer. This is just a cheat code because I want y'all to have really beautiful pieces. Because again, this is a great scene. I love this environment. But if I was looking at this environment and the video was just this, I can't see what's going on. And it's not really selling the environment piece to me. So nice, slow, beautiful camera movements. They're the way to go. I think Tina has a little bit more that she'll talk about camera later with setting that sort of thing up. The other thing that I wanted to show off, because Tina, I'm going to give some behind the scenes that we didn't talk about before. One of the things that led to this this stream is we were looking at some I think it was actually a sale from I don't know, some time ago, and there was somebody who was selling this kind of like character animation VFX pack, something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they had put so much attention to detail in showing off in the video their VFX, and I was like, that's the thing. That's the 10%, Tina, that a lot of people miss, is that make this so enticing. Because I was watching it and I was like, that looks great. That's so cool. And there was little details that people were doing that kind of sold this off. So I have gone through and I have made a quick sequence, nice wordsmith here, and made a few assets or whatever. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we'll just I could pop out a window. That's probably easier. Viewport, second viewport. That's outliner. That's not what I wanted to hit. Viewport, my sensitivity. There we go. Second viewport. It's over here. We will pilot the right camera and then drag it over. So I have made a very simple camera. I've called it Explosive Cam. It's very, very simple. And we'll kind of expand this a little bit, hopefully, so we can see as much of this as possible. And I can still hit this little play button. And I'm just going to play through this. This is, again, using the free pack from here. And I've just pulled in one of the free VFX packs that's free on the marketplace now. So you can get all these assets and play around with this sort of thing yourself. And I'm just going to go ahead and click play. And we're just going to fly through here. This is the most amazing camera cinematography you've ever seen in your life. And we got some cool explosions. Somebody's blowing up this city because, I don't know, bad guys are bad. And that's cool, right? Like, that was a cool little sequence. Nothing, I would say, to, like, blow your mind, but pretty cool. I don't know. I'm going to try. What's missing? Tina, even you can answer. Tina, why is this cool but not super cool? Like, what have I missed here?
It's a pop quiz.
It is the most pop quiz.
Oh no, performance anxiety.
There's no right answer, but there is one thing specific that I notice. Thank you. Impact. Hey, and I'm seeing it in chat too. It's impact. It's camera shake. It's selling the explosion. I'll see this happen fairly often where people are like,
the juice, as John said.
Yeah. They'll do a VFX pack and they'll show off like these cool explosions, and it's a cool explosion. My fire didn't go away yet. It's a cool explosion. Like, that explosion looks cool, but I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like an explosion. It looked like one, but it didn't
just
feel
barely jaunting through explosions.
It didn't feel like one. So this goes precisely back to that very beginning thing that I said, which is that the artwork itself is the big piece, but it's not the only piece. You need to sell the artwork. The way you sell an explosion is to make the camera feel it. Make the camera feel the explosion. So what I've done, we just have this very simple scene here, and I'll actually even walk through here how to do this in a second. But what I've done is within my camera, I've just added a couple camera shake things here, and I've disabled them. Let's make them active real quick, and let's see how different this feels now with just a simple camera shake. For full transparency, I did this in about an hour before the stream. So even if like you're the reason I say that is if this isn't like, if you're like, I don't really want to deal with sequencer, I'm not this guy, I want to make cool VFX. I'm just saying that to show it doesn't take long. And I learned the camera shake in that hour and then also implemented it. It didn't take a lot of time, but hopefully you'll see how much more. Let's pause that, go back to the beginning because the particle effects just refused. I can't reach the edge. There we go. There we go. Bring it back to the beginning and do this one more time and see if how this feels in comparison. There. Very simple. I would argue refine this further. Again, it took me an hour, very quick, put together. But that sells the explosion to me way more. There's no sound effects. We're not hearing an explosion, but I felt that. And so did the camera guy, clearly. That's shaking him around. Like, he's having a hard time with that. Those little details, those just tricks of presentation make that go from like, oh, there's some explosions to, oh my gosh, there's some explosions. Like, that's a big difference there. And setting this up, very simple. So let's walk through it real quick. I just put these all in the main content. Oh, these are levels. Let's turn off my filter, please. Excuse me. Level filter? Thank you. I just put a couple things in here. So made a level sequence up here. Add level sequence. Went into that. Made a camera. And then once we were in here, you can just right click, blueprint class. If this is collapsed, go ahead and open that. In here, you can just type in shake. Right here, we'll have camera shake base. Click it, select, bring it in, name it shaky. Oh, shaky shot because it auto-saved. That's what that is. And now you have this blueprint, which is opening in the wrong window. So bring it over here. For this one, I went pretty simple. There's a Perlin noise. There's a couple different camera shakes that you can use. Perlin noise, if you're an artist, actually, even if you're a programmer, you're probably very familiar with Perlin noise. Very staple one. Go ahead and hit that. And then really, there's only a few things. Like, you can get pretty granular here if you want. There's really only a few things that I worried about with this, which was the duration, how long to blend in, how long to blend out, and then under rotation, that's basically where actually all of the movement that I showed you there was just in rotation. You could add some actual translation and stuff there too if you wanted, but it was just rotation for here. And then changed the rotation amplitude and rotation frequency. So this is how much, like how big the shake actually is. And then the frequency is how fast the shake actually is. So you just balance those two numbers to find the sweet spot that you want here. So I'll actually just go ahead and open the three that I made before. And you can see this one was about 2.5 and 10 for the rotation amplitude multiplier and frequency multiplier. I did 1.5 seconds. That's what this 1.5 is. It's the seconds. Blend in time was almost instantly because I really wanted that to hit. And then a blend out time where the cameraman can, calm down and get hold of the camera to kind of ease that in. That was A. B, I did a bit shorter, and I'll show you why here in a second. But it was actually the same rotation amplitude multiplier and amplitude frequency. I would argue mix it up. Don't use the same thing. That would probably give you a little better result. Even if the number is slightly, like if this was like 2.3 and then maybe the other one was 2.8, just a little bit of difference can go a long way into, making it feel organic. And then, if I'm not mistaken, C was the longest one. And I actually did increase the rotation amplitude here because that final explosion was bigger and I wanted it to feel bigger. Once you've made all these, you're pretty much ready to go. Inside of your sequence, you can add your camera in. Once you're in here, you'll have the name of the camera. You can expand this, go to the camera component and hit add. And then towards the top, you'll have shake. And then you can add your different shakes here. Again, I have 3 that I used. One was that kind of medium length one that just sort of happens right here on that first explosion. Then this second explosion here is actually kind of 3 explosions back to back. Let's go through here and kind of come through it. There's this first one that happens about here. That starts the fire that didn't spawn for some reason. Then I have a second explosion. There's the fire. And then a third explosion that happened here. So I wanted 3 different explosions to happen. I didn't just want to do the one and done. But overlaying 3 at like really long lengths will then multiply those, camera shakes over it. And it can really make it really crazy as you stack more and more of those on. So I wanted the first 2 to be a little bit shorter. That way the blend out time was quicker and it could go in here. From here, we just have the camera shake. You can add from here. Once it's in here, you can select it and press Alt and drag to make another one. You can pull them down to add it to another layer or another layer. You can keep adding layers if you want. I don't know why you'd really need more than 2 or 3. Some people will actually use a couple different ones where they have very small, like kind of micro judder, and then like more dragged out kind of motion to kind of get a little bit more natural movement there. But that was it. I mean, it was quite literally this. And then for the explosions themselves, they were particle effects that I brought in, added a VFX trigger, and just made it go from activate, deactivate, or trigger. So for the flames, it was be deactivated, activate when ready. And then for the explosions, I just set a trigger and added a key where I wanted them to explode. So again, this took like an hour and a half. I would say if I put in another 30 minutes, really fine-tuned it and polished it up, it would be even better. But it can make all the difference in selling an effect. This can also be true of character animations. I've seen people that were, they have a character that jumps up and it slams the ground, and the animation looks really great, but the camera's just that. And if you had it slam the ground and the camera jolted for a second, that sells that impact way more than if it wasn't there. So these are like, again, it's the little things. Some of you guys are watching this being like, oh yeah, obviously you want camera shake and add explosions, but it's not inherently obvious to everybody that that's something that they should consider. And it's amazing how that little thing can have such a huge impact on the look. So yeah. That was mostly it, Tina, unless there was any questions that I should demonstrate.
Let me double check.
It's
I mean, I think it was pretty straightforward, honestly. Thanks for walking us through that, actually.
Yeah.
I think that was a great example of, just adding a little bit of extra something can really sell what it is that you're trying to show off. And the only addition that I have from mine, I have a particular tool that I wanted to show everyone, because obviously this is fantastic for showing off like a VFX, right? Or really selling a particular scene. What if there's an example where you just have the environment that you've built and you're not trying to add any extra VFX or necessarily anything extra on top of what you've already built. You just want to show off what you've already made. And there's a really fantastic... Oh no, Dan, why?
Just background video.
There's a really fantastic and neat tool in the engine that I love. Most of you probably already know it, but it is the camera rig rail, which is basically just a spline that you can set up, attach a camera to, and that way, if you're worried about having your keyframes out of sorts, or you're worried about not having very smooth, nice motions to get that video because you've decided, all right, Dan and Tina knew a little bit about what they were talking about, and I want a video on my portfolio, or I want a video of my environment I spent all this time working on, or I want a video of my asset pack that I worked so hard on, all those sorts of things, right? But you don't necessarily want to add anything extra to it. You just want to show off what's there. Great. Rails are the way to go. I'm telling you. And they're so simple. All right. Let me get my screen share ready to go.
Go for it.
So here's what I'm going to show is a great example of this is how to get the tool set up, but you would want to take it a step further with the things like Dan was showing off with camera movements or things that really add that extra oomph. What I'm going to show you is literally just here's the tool, how to set it up, how to attach a camera to it so that all the hard work is done. It's on the rail. It's going the way that you want it to. You have that nice smooth motion set up. All good things.
And I would actually also say the way that I did that camera move, I didn't use the rail, and it definitely would have been easier with the rail. So Tina's bringing some good points here.
They are nice. All right, let me listen, y'all.
Yeah.
I may spend the majority of my life on computers and on the internet, and I'm still struggling. Give me just a second.
Once you start your demo, I will also do another freeze frame and then get back to my post.
Okay. I have my demo pulled up for whenever.
Okay. Let me switch to it.
Okay. I trust in you.
All right. I gotta do something different.
Back. Oh no. If I am looking off to the side, by the way, that is because I have to. So that I can see
good story.
The questions and stuff. I know it's not the most polite for me to not look at you and pay attention to you, but I must unfortunately look and pay attention to the side here. But yeah, so anyway, I've got this. Is it pulled up? I can't look at the other screen.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Welcome. So this is similarly also a scene that is currently available in our free marketplace. Assets is the... I'm struggling with words now, everybody.
Wordsmith.
Wordsmith here. But it's part of the 6 environment pack. There is one of them that is called, I believe this one's the Treehouse. Yes, this is the Treehouse demo. So I didn't even set up the scene or anything. This was all pre-set up and is just a level innate straight out of the box to show off all of their hard work. But what I want to go through today, like I said, is camera rails.
Woo!
Everybody clap. All right, thank you. So first, just to set one up, we're just gonna create. Hello, where are you?
And then don't mind me if I'm looking down awkwardly. I'm reading chat.
I will mind. I'll mind very much.
Oh, the claps are coming in.
There's the claps. Thank you, everybody. I needed it. So we're just gonna create right here, camera rig rail, easy peasy. It's gonna show you this little doohickey.
Love me a doohickey.
Gotta love you, doohickey, right? So basically, all that this is a spline that you can attach a camera right to. And it's going to make your life so much easier. So much easier. Let me just turn this around a little bit. So you can see right here, it already has some of these spline markers set up. If you want to create more as you extend this out, you can do so by hitting Alt while you pull out, and it'll create more of these markers for you to adjust and rotate and change. Thankfully, this environment is pretty straightforward, right? It's got this... Can you see my cursor? I didn't check, actually. Okay, you can see it's got this nice straight path that goes straight down all the way up to this very creepy thing that we'll look at in a moment here. I'm using words like thing and doohickey because
no, those are technical.
They're professional.
That's technical jargon.
They're professional jargon for sure. So all you
don't forget about the
you
thing
grab
about
the
bomb.
center here. Yes, of course. How could I? But yeah, so you just begin pulling out the end of your spline here. For this, you don't really want to rotate. You almost exclusively just want to use the move tools. Let me just give you a little bit of that horrible jerky camera motions that Dan was like, don't ever do them, please. I
Avoid them at all costs. They're fine sometimes, but definitely do not do them if you can at all avoid it in any sort of demo, like not demo, like portfolio.
Yeah.
No, I guess demo was right, but this is technically a demo. Now I'm stumping on words.
I did it. I infected you with my incapability of speaking. That's a word.
Oh, good point. Anami Moose, doodads also.
Oh yes,
there's doodads.
Thingamabobs and doodads. So what I'm doing here, I'm just holding Alt as I go along to create another section along the spline here. First, I'm just gonna set up a simple line basically that follows the path over to our conclusion here, which is this cool guy.
Cuddly and soft.
Yes, cuddly and soft. Very friendly looking. For sure. That's how I felt.
Yeah, turning cog.
Yes. But so this is just getting the initial line set up here, getting you those really cinematic looks through the trees. But what I want to do, I'm going to start pulling these down so that it just kind of walks along the path. Now, there's a couple camera tricks that I'll show you in a moment here, but especially in an environment, like a pre-built environment specifically, my personal favorite way of showing them off, instead of doing like drone views from above or anything like that, is to have the camera following the perspective of what a character would be seeing if they were the ones walking through. So since we already have this nice path laid out for us, I'm gonna have the camera take the path. You know? Why not? It's already made for us. So I'm gonna pull this down. And you can see that there's these other sections here. This will mostly help with going up or down. We'll play with that in a moment. It'll also alter. The closer you get to the middle point, the tighter those you know, waves. There we go. That's the word. The waves will be. And you can create more of them as you go along if you find that you need more. This is a pretty simple setup, so I think our 3 will probably be fine. Gonna have this just go right through the middle of our beautiful setup here. And the only time I'm gonna have this go off the rails of it being set at the bottom is for dramatic effect at the end here. Like, we're being lifted. We're being lifted up and towards whatever this wonderful creature is that intends us no harm whatsoever. All right, so there we go. We have our rig rail set up. That was stupid easy.
Yeah.
Now, we're just gonna make our camera. So we're gonna go in here. We're gonna go to camera. We're gonna make us a cine camera actor, which is just short for cinematic camera actor. Pop that doohickey in here. Then find your rail. I have a couple others in here that are pre-set up, so we'll go in there in just a second. Find whichever rail it is. It's our rail 3. Gonna take our cinematic camera actor and literally just have it parented underneath that rail so it's attached. Go to our transforms here, set those to 0 so that they sit at the beginning of the track. And now, if I were to set on the rail here where you can see in the preview, you can see current position on rail. If you move that along, it's making our camera follow along the rail and you have nice smooth movement. So that's the setup. That's literally all you have to do for it. You can change the rotation of your camera. You can also pull both of these into sequencer, and then you can adjust the camera angle as it goes along to make it more cinematic. But that's it. That's the whole setup. You pull in the rig rail, have it follow the path that you want, and attach your cinematic camera to it. There you go. So another example here, this is my first setup. Let me get this going. Now, of course, I have this set where you can actually see the rail, but that's on purpose so we can see what we're doing, right? As we go through, we're just having the camera, again, follow the perspective of where the laid out is. Up into our spooky.
In our comfy, calming,
wow,
zen demon tree.
And there you go. That whole setup literally takes 5 minutes, if that. And that is, like I said before, basically just one of the most stupid, easy ways that you can set up a nice, clean camera movement that'll go through your environment. This is without any added VFX, without any added extra anything. This is just simply walking through what is already available for you, right?
Yeah.
So.
And then add just some camera rotation. Key that in, and you're pretty much
and that's it
there, right?
Yeah, and there you go. You have a good way to show off a couple different versions of your environment here. Oh yeah, Anonymous mentioned, don't forget to mention about rendering out. Yes, don't forget to actually render out your sequencer. You can do that really easily. Where is it? Oh my god. How am I forgetting?
Constantly putting you on the spot today.
How am I forgetting? It's a shot, and you can literally just kick it out straight from the engine here. I'm under pressure and I'm forgetting. But,
I'd have to have the engine up and
Robert mentioned, yeah, now mix the two techniques together. Exactly. So you have your nice, smooth main camera motion, add in the couple sweeping shots, all that good stuff. There is one other thing I want to show super quickly in the actual camera settings themselves. Now, something to consider, right? Especially if it is an environment. This applies for everything, but works especially well for environments. Of course, that's where most of my background is from, which is why I keep leaning into that so hard. But in cameras, main thing to consider, first of all, as long as you have a post-process volume in your environment, first make sure that it's set to infinite. And spell infinite right first. If you're going to be using post-process, that's fine. Throw it in there. Make sure it's set to unbound so that your camera is picking it up no matter where it is. Otherwise, it'll only work within the actual space of the volume.
With the asterisk being, unless you have multiple post-process volumes for different areas.
Yeah, doing different things.
Specific. But
if
you only have the one, then just make it unbound.
Yeah. Set that to unbound, and then your camera settings will default to whatever is set in your post-process. So your camera will pick up on anything you do in there, unless you specifically go into the camera itself and change things within the camera. But by default, it will follow whatever settings you put in the post-process and then go from there. I'm not going to bore you all too much with actual cameras and lens settings, and there's all kinds of things here that we could get into, which is a whole other discussion. By default, cinematic camera is set by a 16:9. That's fine. You can keep all that the same. The main thing that I want y'all to think about and consider for the camera it's literally right here staring me right in the face. By default, the focal length I think is set to like 11.8, I believe, which is fine. But the human eye, if you want to replicate through your camera what the human eye sees, is anywhere between 35 to 50. So again, focal length by default, I'm pretty sure, unless I'm forgetting, but I don't think I am, is set to 11.8. And this is fine, But as you can see, this does not feel like the perspective of a human being looking down this path right now. And I'm specifically setting this at what would be approximately head level. And this still does not feel like what you would actually be seeing. So if you're going to do a video and you're going to set it by rendering through a camera directly here in Unreal, set it at minimum 35. And now if I pull back to the same spot, you can already see how this pulls in and is getting the focal effect of the whole scene to mimic the human eye a little bit better. The higher you push this number, of course, and always test, find what you think fits best for you. But the higher you push this number, the more it pulls everything in. The lower it is, general rule. Lower the number, the taller the human. Higher the number, shorter the human, and how they would experience things. I myself am actually quite tall in real life, which surprises most people for some reason when they meet me for the first time, but I am quite tall. So I tend to just set it at 35. That's a pretty safe focal range for most of these things. This is also a good tip if you're doing character work, though, especially in something like ZBrush or anything like that. If you think that the face you're sculpting looks strange, it could literally just be the focal distance that you're looking at that is making it look skewed. So set that distance to 35 in most things, and it'll make it feel closer to what you see in your actual day-to-day experiences. But that's my other main advice. Try to keep that focal length number anywhere between 35 to 50, and it'll show off your environment in a way that is closer to reality, closer to if you put a character into this level, what they would be seeing, how they would experience, how that world would feel around them, which really helps to sell the atmosphere and mood of whatever this portfolio piece is, or asset pack, so on and so forth. But that's that.
Oh, nailed it.
Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, these are great tips. I also
pull down my stream if we want to pull over to.
Yeah, you're already up, and I actually just sent you a couple links. Just some good sequencer goodness if you want to throw that in the chat for folks. One of them is the actual render out queue. So if you want to see how to render your things out, there's that.
Yes,
and there's also just a general whole guideline for those, like I said, that were like me, that just did not want to get into sequencer. Do it. Start here. You'll make great stuff. It'll be good times.
Yes. But the point really of both of these demos from us was to show that these are very simple, easy to enact things that'll make a huge difference in how you present your project or whatever it is that you're trying to show off. And taking that extra half an hour to go through the trouble will be that extra step above maybe someone who doesn't have a video, or someone who didn't bother to put in that extra camera shake when walking through their explosions. You know, they're small detail work, but it's ways to further sell what it is that you're trying to get the viewer to experience by looking at your project.
And I mean, there's great documentation. We have a ton of awesome documentation to go through these things too, but also don't be afraid to just like do it an internet, like hop onto YouTube and if you want to see like a visual practical example, I found videos for both the things in terms of linking all of the VFX in sequencer and setting up camera shake in two different YouTube videos. Learning it took the longest, and then after that it was about maybe an hour, like 30 minutes to an hour to set everything all up and make sure that it was timed well and all that stuff. And I only had to learn it the one time, unless I don't do it for like 6 months and then try to do it again. I'll probably need to brush it up. But usually once you learn it and then you keep using it, you only have to learn it once, and then you're good to go. And again, that can just go through and make selling your projects so much better. Like I would personally, again, if I was viewing the marketplace and trying to find something to buy, I would much more enjoy a nice, beautiful, smooth camera through over just like, here's the player character when we're running around with a mouse. Showing that it's playable is great, and there is definitely, you know, validity to jumping in and playing it, but make sure you also have a way of seeing it, because the playing it shows that it's playable. That's great. I would like to know that, but I also want to see what I'm looking at and be able to see it well. So those sorts of things. And then, yeah, if you're doing character animations, if you're doing VFX and things like that, like, don't forget how much you can sell it with the camera, like with the camera movement, with the camera motion, with adding things like camera shake, changing, you know, field of or view or focus. If you're trying to, like, you know, play with, like, something got intense, the character did this, and you draw that field of view out, you know, things like that. Those sorts of things can really add that final layer of like 10% to a project and really make it shine where otherwise it may not as brightly. So yeah, these are little things. They go a long way, and there's so much more. We could talk for forever. Well, in 2025, I'll be back for part 2.
Yeah. After the mandatory
6
months.
Yeah, tips and tricks.
There was a quick thing from Mega Mocap VR. That's a great point too. They said, I have to say Shift C in Sequencer to hop in and out of your camera cut viewpoint is the biggest tip for me, and I agree. That's hotkeys in general, low-key are
low-key.
Oh no, I didn't mean it that way, but here we are.
Though. You did.
And there's hotkeys in general are incredibly helpful for just speeding up workflows, in my opinion.
And in the link that we just posted in chat, there's the sequencer hotkey list in that too. So definitely check
it out.
Check that out, and also just check out like the general, like, Unreal Engine hotkey things. Like, you'd be surprised how many people don't know them that have been working in the engine for years and years and years, and that you just like blow their mind when you just like Alt-3 into unlit mode. And they're like, "What did you just do? How did you do that?" And you're just like, "Oh, just Alt-3." Like little things like that are huge. And
you feel like a god.
Yeah.
All right, not to tangent too far. Gonna reel us back in. So I do have a couple marketing tips. So these tips are definitely going to apply more so to those of you who are looking for things to apply to game pages or marketplace pages. This is less for portfolios and more for actual products. However, some of them can still apply to portfolios, but I just want to put that disclaimer out. This one is definitely intended more so for y'all you've done the thing. You did the hard work. Congratulations, you made the thing. Now what? Well, here's what now. So first tip that I want to give, and arguably the most important in my personal opinion, is make your content. If I'm looking down at my list, I literally wrote it out, but I don't have my glasses on, so if I squint a lot, I apologize. But make your content appealing to your target audience. The reason I specify this, and I'm absolutely guilty of this too, so this is not me calling any of y'all out. This is me lovingly pointing this out to you. But a lot of developers usually have a very bad habit of marketing to other developers. So especially if you've made an indie game or something like that, where you're trying to target more of a gamer base, a lot of us just end up marketing towards other indie developers instead of towards the people that you want to actually buy your game, experience your game. So keep that in mind. The places that you probably usually frequent, such as the forums or Reddit or Twitter or all of those, are still great places to market, but make sure that you're doing it in the right places on those platforms. Because usually we're existing, as Anonymous said, the Twitter/X circle where all your followers are game devs. Exactly. Usually if you're posting developer tips, you're going to be getting other developers flocking around, which is great. And that's not to say that they will not be interested in what you are making or play what you're making, but they're not, those are your friends. Those are your peers. Those are not your target audience. The only time other developers would be your target audience is if you're making asset packs or you exist mostly on
Tools.
the marketplace. That is when you would want to market towards other devs. But when you're making a game, a film, anything other in the entertainment or media space, you need to find that audience and market to them. And the best way to do that, find other games or projects that you enjoy, that you heard about, that you think their advertising was done exceptionally well, and see where and how they found their audience. A lot of the times, one of my biggest tips is find what your general gameplay loop is, right? Find another game that has a similar gameplay loop and see how they built their community. How did they build their player base? And that's a good place to start because those are going to be the same types of players who would likely play your game. They've already proven that these are games that they enjoy and that they like and that they will spend their money on. There you go. The path is set before you. But that is the main thing I really want to dig in there is make sure that you're marketing towards your audience, not your peers. And this includes doing a lot of things on multiple platforms, which again, a lot of us are developers. We're not marketers by nature, especially if we're indie with either solo devs or small teams. Most of you have probably focused on, you know, the technical side of things, and that's fine, but that means that you don't have a team behind you to do this for you. So you have to do it. Take the time, make an account on every single social platform for your project. Even if you don't think you're going to be using it often, first and foremost, you need to snag that name. Because if you don't, and another project comes along that has the same name, they get it. You are now swept under the rug whenever they post something, whether it's in a related field or not. You have completely lost that potential section of marketing for yourself. So again, every single platform, even if you don't think you're going to use it, doesn't matter. Make an account for it with your project name. But I recommend posting on all of those different platforms. And that is with that same advice that I gave before of you don't have to make a whole bunch of everything. Like, how do I phrase this? You don't have to make 8 individual videos. You can make one really, really solid demo and then pull a really, really solid trailer. And from that 1.5 minute to 2 minute trailer, pull out snippets that you can then use on all of the other platforms. And that's not, the hard work goes into that initial trailer, right? Don't spend a ton of time remaking the same thing over and over. Spend your time making 1, 2, 3 of these really incredible pieces that you can use either in your press kits if you have people that are reaching out that want to know more information, or that you can pull out for your own platforms and have that be what you sink your time into, and then just pull from those. Again, this goes back into that home base thing I was talking about before. Have this handful of really incredible assets, really incredible content that you have spent a lot of time nurturing and making very good, and just continually pull from there until you have the time to make something new. Or if you have an update to your game, or maybe you've gone from demo to full release, then it's time to make something new that's going to get people excited. That goes into my next point here of the 2 most powerful things known to the marketing world, and that is trailers and demos. If you have a game or anything like that, try to make a playable demo. A free playable demo, especially if you're an indie dev, is incredibly powerful. It's a way to get people to buy into your brand, buy into your products in a way that feels less risky to them. Because unfortunately, the larger a studio gets, or the longer their list of games is, it's the same thing I was talking about with resumes before. If you have that experience that you can lean back on, there's already these assumptions made based off of your previous work, what people can expect. If this is your first game, I cannot stress how important it is to have a playable demo, because there's no reason in the current gaming market for people to just take you on your word, which is unfortunate, but that's just how it is. So have a playable demo ready so that they can play, give people just enough of a taste that they want more, and then have plenty of follow-up trailers and content that you can kind of feed that curiosity with in the meantime until you're ready for a full release. And those trailers, like I said before, make sure that they're good quality. I'm not just talking about like smash cuts between all these dramatic angles. Show gameplay, show the actual assets, show the world. You can show snippets of narrative if you want to, but show the things that make your project special, that make your project stand out. Highlight those things but just a taste. Don't give them the full thing, because you want them to buy the actual experience and to get the whole experience for themselves. But make sure you focus in on the things that make your project unique, that make it stand out, and that should be the highlight of those trailers.
Sampler, platter, hors d'oeuvre, basically.
Yes.
Yes,
exactly. Then my last tip following up on these is solid thumbnail, solid copy, which Dan covered earlier when you were talking about portfolios. But the same thing applies here. If you're scrolling through Epic Game Store or Steam or any other game launcher, the thumbnail for your game is going to be one of the main things that draws people in. Besides just tagging it correctly, of course, with whatever applies to your project, having a thumbnail that is catchy, that has something to show for your game or what they can expect, is very important and is actually not done very often. A lot of times that you'll find they just have the logo of whatever the name is, which is great. That should definitely be part of it. But what do I care about the name of this game? I don't. Show me something that makes me want to see more. Either have, if you have a stylistic game, for example, show some of that style, some of that personality in that logo, in that title, in that thumbnail. There has to be something that draws them in further, whether it be a unique color palette, whether it be a unique font, something that has personality and drive to get them further into that home base. Then, when they're there at the home base, they've made it to your game page, your marketplace page, wherever, you need to have a fully fleshed out copy, text version of what they can expect in your game. And you should include everything in this. Now, don't lay out exactly what the narrative is from beginning to end, but you should, if there is a narrative part of this involved, you should have a brief synopsis of it. It's the same thing when you've gone to a bookstore and you're reading the back of a book. You're getting that synopsis of what it is before you take it out. The exact same thing. You need to have that so that it gets people interested in what story it is that you're trying to tell. If gameplay, a very interesting, unique gameplay loop is part of what you're trying to really focus on, have a description of it. Don't just rely on the trailer. You need to actually, in text, explain what is your gameplay loop. Is it an RTS? Is it a first-person shooter? Is it isometric? What is it? What is it that they should be looking for that's going to get them interested? And list it, describe it in print, do it. Harkening back to our stream that we did last week about accessibility as well, if you have really unique accessibility features or things like that, put that in your game page so that people who might not otherwise be able to play your game know that they can, and they're more willing to actually take the leap and try out your experience. These are all sorts of things to consider when writing out your game page. There's too many times where and this goes back to the portfolio thing too, where, like you said, Dan, there might be, Hilltop 2. The description, I made a hilltop, y'all.
Yeah.
And that's that. What
What is
about the
the-
hilltop? Did you make the foliage? Did you make it
Yeah.
through landscape tools? Like, how did you sculpt this in ZBrush? Was it straight in the engine? Same with this. Describe what it is, why I should care, and why I should play it.
Or
If you
buy
don't
it,
do that,
or-
I'm not going to care.
Yeah.
Which is just the harsh reality of properly marketing or not properly marketing. You have to get the attention of strangers who you are competing for their attention and their time with hundreds of other things. So you have to give them the reasons clearly why they should care about your project instead of another. And sorry, Dan, what were you saying?
No, I was gonna say, I mean, a game, tool, asset packed, any of it. Like show them why this tool, why your tool versus someone else, why your game versus somebody else, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely. All right. And then the final thing, and this is maybe this is advice that everyone knows. This is not me presuming you don't know this. This is me acting as a way to nag you, basically. You have to post on platforms. You have to reach out to people. You have to talk to people. You cannot just make your game page and do one post, throw it out into the ether, and hope for the best. That's just not how the internet works. You already spent all of your time making this project. Now make sure that you take the time to make it successful. So that includes networking. You can still reach out to other developers, of course, because it's great to get their thoughts and opinions, and they could also be other players, but you should also be reaching out to influencers, YouTubers, people who play games for a living. If they play games similar to yours, reach out to them. See what you can set up. See if they would play your game, if they'd give a review of your game. Now, there's caveats to this, of course, because that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a good review. But we're under the assumption here that you made something incredible that they're going to be blown away with, right? So you have to be brave and you have to talk to these people and reach out to them to see if they will expand the visual of your project to their already built-in follow base, right?
And if there is feedback that's not the most positive, be receptive to that, because those sorts of things could just be like little fixes that once you make, now you have that great
Yes. Yeah. Be receptive and market the changes that you have made. So if you've made a patch that has fixed X amount of bugs or whatever, you should also be pushing that on your platforms as well. Make a tweet, make a post, make a follow-up on your game page that says this patch came out and fixed these issues, because then you're being transparent to your gamer base. And it also shows that you care about this project and is more likely for people to follow along as it slowly becomes exactly what it is that you want it to be.
Yeah, and depending on what it is, I mean, if they're like little fixes, like patch notes are great. If they're big fixes, patch notes are still great. Supplemental video goes a long way. Show the changes. That's also a huge one.
Yes. Yeah. Another thing is conventions. If you have the time and finances, because I understand this isn't an easy thing for a lot of people, but if you have the capability, go to gaming conventions. There is no better place to try and get more eyes on your game. And I'm not talking developer conventions. Still go to those because they're fun. But for example, GDC, if you're trying to market your game exclusively at GDC, we fall into the same trap I said at the beginning. You are a dev marketing your game to other devs. That's not what you want. You should still, if you have the capability, like I said, do things like that to make those kinds of connections, but that is not your player base. That is not your target audience. So make sure you're going to conventions based around that target audience. And that's pretty much that. I'm gonna tie that up on a bow there because otherwise it's just gonna start sounding like I'm rambling. But you need to be posting. You need to be posting often. if you have the time for it, literally just take a screenshot of your game or project once a week and toss it on your main platform every weekend, every Friday, something like that. Put in a little caption of, hey, here's the things that I've done for this week. Or, hey, are you interested in these kinds of games? Check mine out. Make sure you're doing it to force the algorithm to look at your content and get it out to the people who need to see it. It sucks. I understand. Marketing is not what y'all mostly went into the industry for, but it is an unnecessary, no, it is a necessary but evil accompaniment to what it takes to be successful. And again, I know you know this. This is me just being like, you got to do it. So if any of you have been potentially procrastinating doing that, maybe let this be the thing that is like, okay, I should do that. I should go make that account. I should go claim that name. I should make that post, so on and so forth.
There's been a couple great ones in chat, but I just want to do my job in a dark cave and be left alone. Relatable. I also loved earlier, the secrets of the hill must remain a mystery. But see, now I'm engaged. Like if you had that title as your art piece, now I want to know, right? You got me invested.
Yeah, all right. Well, that was the last of my actual list here. I know we have some more questions, Dan. What is your time looking like? You up for some questions?
I probably got to stop at midnight. I can't go much later than that.
Okay, so we have another 6 hours. No,
8.
8. I know how to math.
Let's say 7.5. I mean, I have a bedtime ritual that I gotta wind down with. So,
all right. Well, before we get into the questions, was there anything else that you wanted to chat about? I know you said you had some other
I mean,
listed.
As we said, there's so much to cover here, and there's so much good information out there. Without dragging this on too terribly long, I would say a good bit of advice in general is just kind of reverse engineer everything. So if you see something that, let's say you found like a portfolio piece or whatever, and you were just like awestruck by it, you're like, oh my god, this is so cool, I love this is so great, or whatever. Once you're done enjoying it, because please enjoy it, stop for a second and go, okay, what are they doing here? Like, obviously, it being a good piece of art is probably going to be the main initial draw, but there is almost always little details in the presentation, in how they position the camera, what they do with the camera, even something as simple as putting like a slight vignette to draw your attention into something like that. A subtle camera movement, if it's supposed to be walking through a forest, if the camera's just doing this, that doesn't really feel like walking. But every so often, just a subtle little bounce, little things like that, all those little details add up, and they're usually that final thing that kind of like really draws you in. So reverse engineer that. If you see a piece that you're just like floored by, analyze it. What are they doing? How are they composing the shots? What kind of things are they showing off? How detailed have they gone? How granular? How not are they being very, opaque about everything? Like, analyze them, because you can reverse engineer a lot of details. We're like, oh, that's really cool. I like that they did that. I want to do that on mine. Well, that was really cool. I should do that next time, or whatever. Or man, I didn't even think of doing that. Those sorts of things, they can really, really go a long way. And while there's great resources out there in terms of like things like this, in terms of, learning tips and tricks like that, you'd be surprised what you'd pick up on your own if you just stop for a second and actually broke it down and be like, okay, what's happening here? Why is it happening? Why is this making me feel awesome? Oh, it's these things. That's awesome. Add those to your tool belt and then use those on your stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And that, honestly, that's good advice for multiple parts of game development, not even just marketplace.
Everything in life, I would say.
Yeah. Find the things that you enjoy and emulate them. Mm-hmm. Put your own personal twist on them.
Definitely put your own personal twist. That's a good point too. Is like, don't directly copy. Like, there's things to learn from people, And then there's just like doing exactly what they do, which oftentimes feels disingenuous because it might not make sense for your project. What they did on theirs might have made complete sense. And you're like, well, I want to be like them, so I'm going to do every single thing. But your project is different and it doesn't really make sense. And then now it kind of feels disjointed for that. So learn from them, emulate, but don't directly lift.
Yes.
I would say in most cases.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see. Let's get into some questions, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah, Flufflepam said that's how they learn drawing. Emulate. Yep. So just while you find a question, I started it with mods. Like that's how I got into this whole scene. And I mean, there were some resources back then, but it was a lot of just like, here's the software, figure it out, reverse engineer it. And there's a vast majority of what I learned early on was from that. It was from taking it, breaking it apart, breaking it, trying to put it back together, rinse and repeat until you could. And then you could start going like, oh, well, now that I know how this all works, now I can start adding my own pieces.
I feel like that's a lot of where devs start too, because that was the start of my journey too, was modding for certain games that I enjoyed. You know what? I can say it. I'll say it. Whatever. It's dangerous.
I was gonna see if you're gonna do it.
I would make mods for Dragon Age Origins is where it all started for me, which is fitting because Origins is in the name. Start of it all.
That is funny.
Mine's a
little further back than then. I would say the one that I really I took it seriously would have been Halo Combat Evolved on PC way back then. But I did dabble with mods in like the original Unreal and Quake and stuff too. That was when I was actually mostly learning it because my neighbor was a few years older than me and way smarter. And he started showing me that stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I think my first custom, quote unquote, custom map, it's how I learned what a trigger volume was in StarCraft. Because they had like you had like your own multiplayer editor, and then you could make trigger volumes and make it play video and audio and write text and all that stuff. And I'm just like, that's awesome. I want to do that. But that was more just kind of like dabbly things. The first one where I'm like, no, I'm gonna make something cool. That was Halo 1.
Yeah, that's awesome though. All right, so freaking question. I've got it pulled up here. Oh my god, I was the page.
I give you all the time in the world, Tina.
I know. I was still unprepared. One thing for that would be a time lapse. Wow, my brain short-circuited. Basically, this question, not because of how they phrase the question, just because my brain doesn't work, but basically it was, would a time lapse of the work help an artist secure a job so the employer can see the work and methods used in time scale? Yeah, definitely. I think that's if you remember to do it, which can be kind of hard. I know for me, I can get very much just sucked into the building process and then forget to take those progress shots. Maybe you could set a timer for yourself or something where at the end of each workday, you take a quick screenshot of your progress that you had done that day so you have enough stuff for a time lapse like that. Not a requirement. I think you could definitely get away without having one of those, but I think it is also great to have one if you remember to do it and set it up, because yeah, exactly, it's a great way to show off your workflow, kind of get an idea behind your thought process. Wouldn't work for me because I have a tendency to absolutely destroy the things that I'm working on several times before it is done. But for some people, it would be very effective.
A time lapse is actually a very interesting way to show off your workflow. I hadn't really considered it from the perspective of like hiring somebody. Like, I love time lapses. I think it's really cool to watch that process, but that is actually probably the most honest way to see how someone works. That's interesting. I like that. I like that as an idea. Yeah, I say it doesn't hurt. because at worst case scenario, it makes nerds like me get happy, and could be a good, benefit for somebody who, like I said, could use that as like, oh yeah, I see how this person works and things like that.
Definitely. I think it could also be useful for yourself too, because then you can look back and see your own thought process, see the parts that got you hung up, that you ended up spending the most time on, so that maybe you can take that information with you to your next project in the future. Not that you wouldn't anyway, but having the visual representation of it could be helpful if maybe you forgot something,
It's also very fun to see how it evolves. I think that's one of my favorite things about time lapses, especially on your own stuff, because you'll go in with an idea and you're like, all right, I'm going to make this. And then you get in there and you're like, I got to change that, or I'm going to add this, or this didn't work, so I'm going to move it over there. And it is just a series of thousands and thousands of those little things. And then once you get to the end, it is predominantly usually fairly different from what you originally had in mind. But because you were there every step of the way making those decisions, it's easy to forget where you started. And sometimes, like, I've had projects where, like, I went back, I'm like, oh yeah, that was the original plan. What the heck was I thinking? It's like completely different now, which I always just find fun.
Yeah, those are fun too, for sure. Next question. What does Epic look for when promoting a project? Well, if we're talking about spotlights specifically, I guess if we had to give just like the most simplified, quickest quick list, we're looking for a project that has at least 30 seconds of video, but as Dan said before, prefers probably closer to a minute 30. I know we also prefer to have a couple of really good stills in there. I'd say three really good stills. And when I say stills, I mean photos, screenshots. Sorry, I get into jargon sometimes and it's hard for me to get out of it. But so a video, at least one. Several is good, especially if you're doing it from different angles. That also helps, but at least one. 3 really good screenshots. And then in the description, some kind of description of their thought process, what was going on when they were making it, all that good stuff. So we have context around why this was made. Why is this here? Who did this? Who are you? Tell me about you and your project and why it exists and why it's so cool.
Yeah.
And final stipulation, it has to be made in Unreal. Not made 100% Unreal. Like you could make something in a different modeler, for example, but the end project needs to be an Unreal Engine, obviously. Anything you would like to add, Dan?
Yeah, I would just expound on it a little bit. Like it's generally better to have maybe a little too much content than a little too little, because people can always skip over content if they're not interested. You can't just generate more of it from, somebody else's thing. So, you don't have to go crazy with it. You don't need like, and here's 3 terabytes of 5,000 stills and videos that I'm going to try to put. Like, it doesn't have to go crazy, but like show off your work. Like really if I was going to distill it down to one point, it's show off your work. Show it off in cool ways. Give us cool videos. Give us cool images. Give us cool breakdowns. Explain what it is. Explain your thought process. Explain learnings that you got from it. Like, show the work off. As long as you have something cool, something unique, and something of quality, and you show it off well, that's basically a shoo-in for it.
Yeah.
So really try to hone in on those. Like, specifics are great, aim for this amount of images, but realistically just do the project justice. If it's worth having a couple videos and a dozen screenshots, then give it a couple videos and a dozen screenshots. Like,
really? It's earned it.
Exactly. And you earned it.
Yes, and you earned it. You earned getting people talking about your cool stuff, obviously.
Yeah. And the other side of it is also just do cool stuff too. Like the presentation is definitely a big part of it. That's what we're talking about here. But also make sure you're doing cool things. Like if you're doing something cool and you're showing it off well,
there you go.
There you go. That's pretty much all you need. That's mostly what I would say I look for. I won't speak for Tina, but that's mostly what I would look for.
Yeah, definitely. Next question. I'm developing something for Oculus. Is it okay to intersperse official footage of the device from adverts, etc., and show reels with captured video and other graphic elements? So this is a whole other potential conversation in and of itself. But the short answer that I will give you is, unless you have express permission from any company, work under the assumption that anything with a copyright you should not include in any of your own self-promotions. Like, unless you literally have a contract with this company that says that clearly has stipulations of what you can and cannot use for them. Easiest thing, just don't do it. Specifically keep to your own project and what it is that you've made yourself, and avoid anything that seems like it could get caught up in copyright, just outright, if possible. That is my short advice for that, because copyright is its whole own other conversation, but just avoid it. Is my recommendation.
Usually feels like one of those better safe than sorry sort of things.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Has anybody asked about a good way to showcase sound portfolios? No, they have not, but that is a fantastic question. I have a little bit of advice. I know, Dan, you are more of an audio person than I am, but I would also recommend, if you're really interested in really digging into good ways of presenting audio, actually reach out to our audio team at Epic. They're fantastic. You can contact like Dan Reynolds or Aaron McLaren, or anyone else on the audio team. They're incredible, passionate. They know audio inside and out, and they would love to talk about it further with you. So make sure to reach out to them if you get a chance. But I'll knock it over to you, Dan. I'm sure you have a better recommendation than I do.
Yeah, I mean, well, so audio is definitely probably the most challenging one to do, because on its own, it can be great, but it's we're used to visuals with most of our things, like to, you know, having some sort of visual element. So trying to find ways that you could incorporate visual elements, now that is going to vary wildly depending on what it is that you're showing off. Is it music? Is it sound effects? Are you doing voiceover? Like what is the audio that you're trying to show off there? And then try to pair it with compelling visuals that can go along with that. It also doesn't hurt usually if like, let's say you're going to show off, I don't know, sound effects as your thing, have like some B-roll of things that would make sense for it. So if you're like showing off rain, put it in a rainy scene, whatever it is that you're showing. And then have at the bottom just a little text that says like better with headphones. That's a good thing to do too, because a lot of times people will listen to sounds on their phone or whatever. And while phone microphone or phone speakers are definitely better than they used to be, they're still extremely limited in their dynamic range. So having a good pair of headphones or you know, something like that you can actually really experience it in. Maybe, you know, obviously this isn't something that you control as a marketing person, but, you know, hopefully they're in like a quiet space, so there's not a lot of like background things that are influencing it, things like that. But yeah, I would just say in general, try to accompany it with things that can help hold the attention in other ways. Like audio clips are great, but I would argue most people are probably a little less likely to just sit there and click on audio and just stare off into nothing. If you have something that can kind of keep their attention so that they can not even really keep their attention, but like immerse themselves in it.
Yeah.
Can go a long way too. But yeah, no, definitely reach out to the audio team, because they would have much better tips than I.
They're awesome. But I totally agree with what you're saying, Dan. And I mean, like a great example, just think about if you click on like YouTube, if you click on a music playlist, a lot of the time they'll have at least an image
Yep.
that matches the overall tone of what the playlist is. So something to visually pair with it for sure. What advice can you give on showcasing the work mostly focused on technical aspects, like technical sides of materials, optimization, etc.? Same thing, honestly. The more you have available of, I would actually, maybe I would argue for technical things, having a breakdown is more important than just visuals. So if you're specifically wanting to show off your material work, show the material graph, show the actual blueprint breakdown of your material instance. And then go even further. Don't just show it, notate it. Explain what your thought process was behind why you used these nodes here, why they plug into this, why your blueprints act this certain way. Because when it comes to technical, especially if you're speaking like technical art, optimization is something that is hugely important for them, especially around shaders or shader complexity, things like that. So being able to actually have that breakdown in your thought process available is fundamental for showing your knowledge base when it comes to those kinds of things.
Yeah, I would break it down into 3 simple steps. Step 1, show the thing off in action. What is it? Is it a material? Is it a gameplay mechanic? Whatever it is that you're showing off, show it off in action. Next thing you do, start breaking it down a little bit. Start, if it's a material, start playing with sliders. Show the like what it can do. Change the, I don't know, whatever you're showing off, the height map on it, the material complexity, like add layers, move layers, whatever it is that you've done technically, show that in action. And then step 3, then really dive into the graph and be like, all right, and here's what this looks like. Here's the blueprinting. Here's the blah, 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 blah. Get them in by showing them a cool thing, then show the cool thing what it can do, like its other variables that it has, and then show you how you did it. Do those 3 steps. That's probably the best way to show off something technical like that. And
Definitely.
if you're like a gameplay programmer and stuff like that, show the prototype. Well, show the gameplay, then show the prototype. Talk about or address things that like like that maybe weren't working and how you solved them. A little bit more breakdown. And I mean, you don't have to get rid of all your trade secrets and stuff like that. Break it down, show it off, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. This one's interesting. When can you use others' work as a base and claim it your own? How much do you need to change it to make it your work? Not just the color, of course. Never. You can never do that. If you use a base from someone else, if you're building off of someone else in any capacity, whether it be a material or the actual geometry of the model, whatever it is, you need to give credit to that person. Now, if you have very much altered an asset, it's totally fair to mention that. You can say, I got the base asset from this artist or from this asset pack, but in order to make it match the style of my project, I had to go in and make a custom shader or change all of the textures myself. And you can claim the parts of the work that are yours, but you can never say just outright that that asset is yours, because it's not, and it never will be unless you made it all the way from beginning to end.
And it's a really easy thing to get around with, where you can just say, like, based off the work of this person. Like, I started with this person's thing, and here's what it is, what I have. If you want to look at the other person's thing, here's the link. Please check it out. This is where it started. And then here's all the work that I did to it to make it what it is now.
Yes. Yep. Let's see. What do you guys think about paid ads? Is it a valid way of marketing a game? Absolutely. It is 100% a valid way to market a game. The problem is not everybody has that kind of finance, especially if you're indie. But if you do, and it's built within your budget, I would say if you're planning on doing paid marketing, plan it in your budget early. Have that allocated way ahead of time before you do it. Because there's no guarantees how effective that marketing is going to be. So don't do it as a Hail Mary. That should be something that you have planned out way ahead of time, probably even before your project has concluded. But it is absolutely a valid way to market your game. It's not an available option for everyone, but if it's available for you, then take any advantages that you can, for sure.
Yeah, no, paid ads are totally valid. Like Gina said. I would say on the flip side of that, though, if you're super small and you really don't even have a marketing budget, the cheapest thing you can do is give out a Steam code to somebody who has an audience. That does not mean they'll play it. That does not mean they'll see it. That does not mean they'll respond. But if they do and they play it and it looks fun, you've just got yourself in front of a bunch of people, and you've at most lost one sale for the person that you gave it to.
Yeah.
That's a valid way of doing it. Now, again, keep in mind, especially the bigger they are, they probably get dozens of them a day. It does not mean that they'll play it, but shoot your shot.
There's no reason to
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's see. A couple more here. Any advice for someone using Unreal Engine for cinema to promote themselves? What to do or where to look? I'm assuming you mean as like a filmmaker in Unreal Engine. And honestly, mostly the same stuff. Trailers, especially when it comes to film, are the key way of marketing your work. So short films as well, if you have the time to do a full short film, that's a great way to build up a portfolio. That would be my main piece of advice there, honestly, is just trailers, short films, and then plaster them absolutely everywhere that you possibly can.
And give them love. I would say that would be my big tip to add on top of that. Definitely trailer. Give the trailer love. Like,
yeah.
Again, the marketing side for a lot of people, I'm one of them, is not the most fun, but the lack of effort shows more often than not. So give it the effort, because somebody else who does give it the effort will outshine you if you don't. So give it the effort. And especially with trailers, and this is something that even huge production houses really struggle with, definitely try to find the biggest balance or the best balance between, like talking too much or showing too much and showing enough. Because you don't want to give away the best bits, but you also want to give away good bits so that people go like, oh, I want to see where that goes. Or I want to know how that unfolds. So
yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm saying definitely, like specifically definitely after everything you say.
Well,
but it's because I fully agree with you.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always the word absolutely. So I'm glad we're not doing that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I absolutely agree with you. In your experience, what has better ROI? Networking within the industry and regular posting, or A/B testing and advertising budget? Honestly, I think the best is a combination of both. But that, of course, is asking a lot. That's stretching resources very thin. I would say it depends on the size of your studio, what your budget is, and another thing to consider, of course, is also what kind of gains do you need to make in order for all of the marketing to have been worth it, because you have to recoup whatever it is that you spend. So networking within the industry could be very, very helpful in that it might land you on a publisher list, or it might get you connected with people who could hook you up with a publisher if that's something that you're interested in. Or you could find other studios that might be willing to work on the project with you. So there's lots of value that you could potentially pull from that. But there's also lots of value to get from just public testing and just opening it up for anyone who wants to play, taking in the feedback, changing things. There's no right answer here, right? It's going to very much depend on what you as a person or as a studio need, what your end goals are, and what you think would best get you there. Which feels like a cop-out answer, but it is unfortunately the best answer I have for you.
Yeah, I would echo that predominantly. I would say networking can be huge because obviously, I mean, there's a million reasons why networking can be huge, but specifically in this case is you might be surprised what learnings you can get from other devs who've already had experience with marketing similar products and what their A/B stories told them and things like that. So you can actually, in some instances, get a little bit of that quote unquote marketing knowledge without actually having to delve into it. Now that marketing knowledge is really good. And all that. And another thing to do is, again, Tina said the demo. A demo can be a really great way of, like, specifically on the game side, of getting that out there and then getting the feedback. Hear what people say. People will play your game and they will say stuff. It'll either be good or it won't be. But if they say bad stuff, then you go, okay, what are they not working with? Whatever. Oh, it's this, whatever. Okay, I need to change that. And then that's you improve the product for the, the full release or next demo or whatever it is. And you can gain a lot of those learnings too, without necessarily having to spend a bunch of money on, actual marketing things like AB and all that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that has brought us to the conclusion of our questions. So I just have one final question for you, Dan, and it is the same question that I ask everybody, but I'm going to have to alter it just a little bit for today.
Okay.
But through all of your experience thus far in the industry and everything that you do and have done, if you had to compile that all down into one piece of advice, and I will answer this question too with you, so it's not just you, but if you had to compile all of that down into one piece of advice to give our wonderful viewers today, what would that advice be?
It's so funny because I've been working with you for some years now, and I know you always ask this question, and yet I never think before the stream that I'm going to be on to sit down for a second and maybe figure that answer out. Golly gee willikers.
It's always hard. It's never easy, and it's why I always ask.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much good advice. I would say, and this kind of feels like a cop-out, but I'm going to kind of tie it back to that reverse engineer as much as you can, for a few reasons. One, you learn stuff. Two, it also kind of teaches you how to learn stuff, and it develops critical thinking. Like, that's a fun challenge to do, is like find like a layman, and if they're just like, I don't like that movie sucks, say, okay, can you explain why? And usually they'll be like, I don't know, it's just bad, or like, I didn't like the story. The story wasn't good. It had a bad story. It's like, okay, why was the story bad? Like, it's very easy to form an emotional opinion on something. It's very difficult to articulate it. And the more that you can develop those skills for articulation, the more you can then use that articulation on your work, on others' work, to further that articulation. And it can really help you be able to then critically think about what you're doing, what you've done, what you were planning on doing, and you can fill a lot of those holes earlier in the process, the more of that than if you're just like, well, I'm just doing stuff and that's it, because I do stuff. So reverse engineering is a big one, but also know when you've reached your limit of, like, you're now putting in a bunch of time to try to figure it out on your own and you're not getting anywhere. Once you feel like you kind of reached that limit, then be okay with being like, okay, well, now I'm going to go venture out and start looking for other resources that might be able to fill in some of the blanks that I wasn't able to fill in on my own.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
That'd be mostly it. Ask me in
Wonderful
5 minutes,
advice.
I'll probably have a different answer, but I'm
well, too late. This is it. This was your submission.
We got till midnight. I got time to figure it out.
No, that was wonderful advice. All right, and since I'm considering myself also host and partial guest, I will also answer the question for this one today.
Yes. Tina,
I think
what would be your one piece of advice with all your industry experience, all the things that you've done in your life up to this point? What would be your one piece of advice to give to people going forward?
And it feels really weird to actually literally get asked the question. And I'm realizing now how much it feels like buttering someone up. It's like, all of your experience.
And then you can just feel the spotlight doing this.
Yeah, just like really.
It's just narrowing in.
Well, my advice, if we're going to keep it kind of topic specific as well around marketing and presenting your work, is believe in yourself, which sounds super cheesy, but you have to. And I don't just mean that from like a, yeah, you should believe in yourself. I mean, literally, for this venture of yours to be successful, you have to. Because if you don't believe in your work and your project, there's no reason for anyone else to believe in your work or your project. A consumer is not going to buy a product that the person who made the product doesn't even believe in. So you have to take pride in what you've done. You have to take pride enough in it to market it, to make content for it, to tell people about it, to shout it from the rooftops that you have made this incredible and cool thing. And you have to stand behind it. Even if you end up changing part of it through critique or whatever else, you have to be your biggest fan, especially through this process of marketing your product and getting it out there to your target audience. You have to. And you should, because you did take the time to make this really cool and incredible thing. And you should believe in the things that you learned along the way and the effort it took to get there. And not everybody does. That's the big thing of this. The fact that you're at the point where you get to talk about this cool thing you made has already put you 10 steps ahead of where most people ever get. A lot of people don't end up finishing the project. They don't get to the point where they can tell people about it. You did. Be proud of that and talk about it. Believe in the thing that you made and believe that it will be successful, and it will be.
That was a way better answer, folks. Definitely listen to that one. That one. No, I mean that's a great that's a great piece of advice. Because humans are uncannily perceptive, and if you ever played a game or saw a movie or whatever, any sort of experience, or heard somebody describe it as soulless, that's usually what Tina's referring to. It's somebody who didn't fully believe in it, and there's little tiny ways that all kind of seeps into the project where it all kind of builds up and you can just kind of feel it. It might be hard to describe, but you can kind of feel it. So believe, like she said, believe in it and commit to it and be determined and stick to your guns for the most part. Like there are learnings, like some people can stick to their guns on things that actually maybe is the poor choice. So always be receptive, but like if you feel like something at the core is like the thing, like it's the important thing, run with it, take it and fly. And people will be able to tell with that. Yeah. That stuff shows.
Absolutely. Oh no, I said it. Absolutely.
Oh no, we have to end the stream.
Definitely. All right. Well, I think that was everything for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Dan, for coming on yet again.
Around for the especially long episode.
Yeah, this was fun though. It was good.
No, this was
good
great.
To chat.
And, yeah.
Like getting everyone's tips, seeing what. Yeah, there's so much more.
Did we see any good tips? I know I saw a couple. There was a couple of really good tips. Was there any other great tips that we missed, or we?
Oh, so many. But the chats will be attached to this stream, so make sure that you read through as we go through. If you're watching this again later, speaking of which, you can watch this later, because if you missed any part of the stream earlier, we post all of them in video format that can be viewed on demand on both our Twitch and YouTube channels at Unreal Engine. You can also keep up with us and all of our latest news on all of our social platforms at Unreal Engine. And if you haven't already, please come join us at the Epic Developer Community. It is a huge conglomeration of anything and everything you could ever need to know about Unreal Engine. We have a slew of tutorials, we have our forums, we have our documentation there now. It is everything you could ever possibly need about Unreal Engine right there at your fingertips on the Epic Developer Community. So check it out. It's a good time. Man, I feel like there's supposed to be more to this outro and I'm forgetting what it is. But any last words, Dan?
Any last words for the rest of the year? Stay hydrated, number one. And number 2, anybody who wasn't able to join us live and is catching the VOD later, leave your tips down below too. We'd love to check in and see. This is all about sharing lovely knowledge. So
Absolutely.
do that.
Do it. Do it now. And for anyone interested in what's going to be coming up next for Inside Unreal, we're going to be digging into a lot of the 5.4 features over the next month. So we're going to have on some folks from animation. We're going to have on some folks about motion matching once that sample releases, because yes, it will be releasing in June. Probably going to have on some of the XR folks to talk about virtual production. Lots of 5.4 stuff coming, so keep an eye out. It's going to be a lot of fun, very technical. It's going to be my head is going to hurt, your head is going to hurt, and it's going to be good, but it's good hurt. It's good knowledge hurt, so don't miss it.
Nothing gets me more excited in a learning environment than going into something that I know like about as little as possible and just trying to absorb anything that I possibly can.
All of it.
I also wanted to point out, Turning Cog said you normally thank the incredible guests, but in seeing we don't have any of those, then that makes sense why you
no, you're right. Thank you to our incredible guest, Dan, for coming on yet again.
Of course.
Of
course.
Hard to thank incredible guests if there aren't any.
It's exactly. So we just skip that part, right?
Yeah.
No, of course. Thank you so much for having me on. This is always a good time. And this has been great. Thank you.
All right. Of course. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you in 2025, folks.
It's 2025. Yeah.